Ready? Aim! There's too many! Anyone see my mammoth? Ah! Stubby! Hello! Hello, I'm back for another lovely week of A Song of Ice and Fire content. This week I am joined by Isaac.
Hello.
Contrary to popular belief, Isaac's flag says he's British, but technically he's Swedish. So we've got an international guest. That's how I'm going to market this. Is that okay, Cajo?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Get those points in.
Yeah. So international episode of Tourney Ground today. No. Isaac, for those of you who don't know, he's a player based in the UK, plays on the UK tournament circuit and been playing for I want to say about 9 months. No, it was last year. 12 months, give or take.
Close. 10. Started the kind of halfway through December-ish last year.
Okay, cool. Yeah. But yeah, obviously, welcome, Isaac. I can't remember. Didn't I have you on before? I can't remember.
You had me on your live stream when we were playing. Yeah. When we were playing, and adventurous things happened on my 5th ever game of Song of Ice and Fire, if memory serves.
Yeah, and then you were on the community chat one, weren't you? That mental one where there was about 30 people. Right.
Yes, indeed.
Cool. So, for those of you that don't know, Isaac was the winner of the Invitational, which obviously, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about some other stuff, obviously your experience of the LGT as well. But first of all, we do actually have to tackle the elephant in the room. Okay, the elephant in the room, that is the new pictures of some of the boxes that have been seen. Have you seen the boxes and the pictures?
I actually haven't. I didn't know that's something you had been shown today.
Technically not new. Technically. But it is everyone's favourite part of the show, where we read a box description and then guess from the box description what could possibly be meant by the box description.
Right.
So we've got 2 units today. We've got Baratheon Haliers and Umber Ravagers, both of which we've seen pictures of previously. The renders of the sculpts have been seen. Now we're looking at them from a this is the back of the box perspective. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, Umber Ravagers. One doesn't immediately equate House Umber and its famous berserkers with cavalry. Yet they do have a few men trained in horsemanship.
Strong start here, people. Strong start.
The Ravagers are as swift and deadly as any cavalry force in Westeros, which is about a non-statement as you could possibly make. They're not as heavily armoured as fully fledged knights from the south, or Tully Cavaliers, I'm guessing. Yet they move just as rapidly and strike just as hard. Allowing Ravagers to attack your rear or flank is to invite a swift and merciless death. Care must be taken not to let them get bogged down in a melee, but a good commander will position them to be ready for that glorious, devastating charge.
Okay, so given all of that they hit just as hard, but with less armor and with the same speed as the Knights of the South, I'm thinking basically going to be Champions of the Stag, so 4-inch movement, except armor 6, morale 9, and then every time when they perform a charge, they can perform any number of panic tests, and for every failed panic test, they roll an additional die on the attack, which specifically hits on the 6.
So you're saying they can take like 4 panic checks to roll 4 extra dice on 6s if they fail them all.
Correct, yeah.
That does seem like very Stark as well. Take wound to do more damage.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's perfectly in theme. They've already said that they can barely ride horses, so I think it's more of the case of just these Umber individuals. If you look at the other Umber units, speed 6, then okay, let's assume they're actually movement 3 for the cavalry, then 3 plus 3. That's basically your regular guys. So they can't actually ride horses. They're actually just pulling the horses along and then slamming the horses over their head into their opponents, really. That's kind of what I'm envisioning here.
Okay. You took that meme way further than I thought you were going to take that meme, and I am glad for it. Yeah, obviously we've seen countless times that the box descriptions are wildly off abilities. I mean, I find it weird that they say they're not as heavily armored as fully fledged knights from the south, because it's like you've got Tully Cavaliers and they're knights from the north,
and Bolton Flayed Men as well.
Yeah, Flayed Men exactly, who are 3+, and they're northern, so like. And they look fairly armored. They look like they've got barding on the horses and stuff like that. I'm gonna throw out there. They're probably gonna be a 4+, which is weird because Outriders are a 4+, and they've got no armor on the horse whatsoever. On Stark Outriders, so like, sure.
Logic wins the day again.
They move just as rapidly, strike just as hard. Is going to be like they're gonna get a bonus on the charge. It sounds like the attacking your rear or flank just sounds like they've got ambush, which is like
maybe Motley. Maybe.
Motley, yeah. I don't know. Maybe they'll have just an auto 6 charge on the cavalry unit with the glorious devastating charge.
If so, that would be pretty crazy.
That would actually be nuts.
Yeah.
And then they can afford to be a little bit less armor, potentially less powerful and things like that. I'm expecting, I'm expecting something that looks not too dissimilar to like Bear Riders, but without the without the range attack.
To be honest, I'm thinking something like I think they might be 5+5+.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah, I can see that.
Probably 5 move. Attacks. I'm not sure. They could go really creative with it, and I hope that they do. It'd be really interesting to see a new interesting unit out there. They could go really creative, create some kind of pseudo lance ability on the charge, but like you said, mostly it's just going to be ambush, which would be really boring. But that's probably just what it's going to be. Ambush or Motley, both of which are garbage abilities.
So, yeah, that's Umber Ravagers. I mean, they look cool. We've seen the sculpts before. I will say, if there's anything that we've learned from the past couple of like sculpts that we've seen digitally rendered, by the time you actually see the sculpts in person, the renders do not actually do the sculpts justice, I think.
No.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the renders nowadays are not quite as good as the sculpts actually are. And they tend to make things look bulkier or bigger than they are as well.
Yeah. No, definitely. It'll be interesting to see what their role is. It's going to be very interesting to see where Stark's role is in general as well. One thing I thought we might actually discuss a little bit later as well is I've really been thinking a lot about the state of the meta at the moment. Obviously, we still have some big tournaments to go to really see how it settles down, but with Night's Watch being as good as they are, Kevin being as good as he is, Free Folk still doing very, very, very well, and the introduction of the new 6 activations Dark List, which has been ruffling some feathers, mine included. I think it's interesting.
We'll talk a little bit about the meta later on, definitely. Next up, we've got Baratheon Haliers. Now, of course,
here we go.
These look great. They do actually look pretty good. Right, let's go. Let's see how this goes. Pardon me. Carly does actually have a question around Umber, so we'll get to this first. What would an Umber force or Stark that the Umber Cav would fulfill? I think they'd work well rather than Zorse Riders in some kind of Brynden Tully Cav style list, or in a Great John list, because they're going to be Umber Ravagers. They'll have the Umber keyword, or House Umber keyword, I thought. So Great John Umber will get some synergy from that in lists that he wants them in. I think that, I'd like to think if they're coming in at let's be realistic. If they come in at 6, they're going to be competing with Outriders, and I think that they'll outcompete Outriders. If they're coming in at 8, they're just competing with Tully Cav, in which case they have to be doing something kind of crazy to compete with Tully Cav. They must be like really good on the charge.
Which would be crazy.
Which would be crazy, because Tully Cav are already very good on the charge. So, for me, I think they have to come in at medium point Cav. So we're looking at like the Hedge Knights of the world. The Umber Ravagers will come in at 7. And coming in at 7, I think that maybe Great John might get value out of a 7-point Cav that isn't Tully Cavaliers. That still has the aggressive output of the Cavaliers, but doesn't have the defensive profile to back it up. And that gives a point for the existing Great John Tully Cavalier lists to actually experiment with a point 3 in the list building elsewhere. I think my only real thing. Halberdiers then. So, House Baratheon's doctrine of heavy arms and heavier armor serves well to make their force into a walking fortress. Walking fortress of 3+, 6+. Yeah. Difficult to assault and deadly to ignore. Well, that's not true.
This is that was wrong in every conceivable way.
Literally. Not particularly.
Congratulations, you couldn't be more incorrect.
Very easy to ignore. Enemies find themselves in a conundrum. Do I play against Baratheons, or do I just win? Particularly against lines incorporating halberdiers. The traditional weakness against cavalry shared by most infantry is nullified.
Wait, what?
That is just a sentence. The traditional weakness against cavalry shared by most infantry is nullified.
Oh, maybe I'm just literate here. Maybe it's the Swedish brain coming through. I didn't really see what literate has to do with anything. Like, if knights are charging and then the person they are charging struggles to read a book, do horses panic? Is illiteracy a weakness of Landscav?
Oh dear.
No, I didn't know that was a way to get rid of the lance ability in the game. Just poorly read your own unit's abilities.
I mean, I'm clearly poorly reading it. The traditional weakness against cavalry shared by most infantry is nullified. No. I don't get it. They're slow? Like, traditional weakness against cavalry would be like, I'm slow.
Yeah.
And that's been nullified. So my halberdiers are quick? I mean, this does seem to indicate some kind of set for charge, in that if you get round the flank, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Or ability that doesn't care about flank. So stand your ground, which would be weird to have stand your ground natively in halberdiers, because I think they have an attachment that gives, or a named attachment that gives. Yeah, stand your ground. Soren says it in chat actually. Yeah, I wouldn't be completely against them having stand your ground if that was the way they were going to go. No charge, no rerolls on the charge, no flank bonuses, no rear. Yeah, okay, I can get it. Sure.
It's interesting. Yeah. Crossbows go lol, but sure. It's cute.
Yep, definitely. Further, a cavalry or flanking force that hesitates in their charge against the Baratheon lines opens themselves up to weaknesses that a good commander can exploit. Alright, the only reason you'd hesitate a charge is if they taunt you and they can't charge the target they want. This heavily implies taunt or set for charge.
Yeah.
Right. That, if we can read anything into these bolts descriptions, they have one or both of those abilities.
Oh, I mean, I think if we actually read into it, then clearly the Baratheon Halberdier Bannerman, or what if they have an attachment or whatever, if they have an attachment, then it's probably going to be something along the lines of an ability called illiteracy. You may read one of your opponent's rules as anything you would like. And that is now what their ability will read for the rest of the round.
Amazing.
That's an order on a 2+.
They change the text on a pure change one word on the text of a piece of your enemy's. Instead of enemies charging you, friends that charge you. Damn, my ability does nothing anymore.
So you see, actually, I'm only going to change one character. Lance Cav goes from a plus to a minus.
So rather than +4 dice,
minus 4 dice on the charge, yeah.
We do 2 dice on the charge. It's a bit scary.
Intimidating presence gives you less wounds failed on back. This is dumb.
Many creative means of destroying the enemy become available to commanders that employ halberdiers in their composition.
Somehow I doubt that.
That again is a bit of a throwaway sentence. Sure, whatever. Like, you're saying that they open up a tactical option, which, yes, units open up tactical option. That is a thing. I misread this when it first started. When I first read this today, actually, I completely misread this. And it says it's got 12 miniatures in the contents, 11 Baratheon Halberdiers, and 1 Baratheon Halberdier. Not reading the word Bannerman on the next line. It's just, I genuinely thought that it was like 11 Baratheon Halberdiers and 1 Baratheon Halberdier. He's a special one.
We're all individuals.
No, we're not.
The Messiah.
So
it's actually the Baratheon soldiers in a nutshell, talking to Stannis.
I mean, first of all, can we just point out no attachments in what I would appear to be a base box no loyalty unit, right? No attachment is fine. Like we've discussed, kind of like generic attachments and whether or not they're that useful for the game anyway. But it is interesting that this is going to. I mean, compared to the Umber Ravagers are going to be interesting because as we project, it's going to be a medium cav point slot. For Starks that allows list building, especially with a commander and in a unit and in a faction that has a cavalry commander, which can utilize that differently. So there's always options there. I think this actually shakes up list building a lot more though for Baratheon, because we are expecting it to come in, and by all accounts, it looks like it's going to come in as a kind of faction neutral unit. And so it's not just list building on Stannis, but it's also Renly side that gets affected. We don't know the points cost, right? I struggle myself, because if this unit comes in at movement 4 at 5 points, you are just going to compare this with Wardens and point at which one's better. If this comes with set for charge, I'll be honest, we're expecting Sundering if we're to model the Halberdiers from other factions as well. Either this is 5 points and it just pushes Wardens out completely, like we've kind of seen. I know that some people disagree, but we kind of saw it with Halberdiers pushing Guardsmen out. Or this comes in at 6 with native Sundering. I don't really see how Sentinels exist in that landscape. Especially when Sentinel is quite a contested trigger in the Baratheon deck. I think if these come out at movement 5 with Sundering and a 7/7/4 4+ profile that we'd expect, and even if they're like a 4/6, if they're a 3/6, that's super interesting at 5 movement. If they're a 4/6 at 5 movement, I still think they just get picked over Sentinels every single time.
It depends on the abilities at the end of the day, and I think for me the biggest question to me about the Halberdiers unit is exactly what role are they going to fill? Baratheons are not in a very good place at the moment, and even though I've seen a lot of people run Renly side, I still don't think Renly side is particularly good. And I think Renly side has been allowed to have gotten better because of Golden Company Swordsman and people playing Golden Company Swordsman versus Golden Company Swordsman, and in a melee infantry grind, Baratheon actually does quite well because that's kind of what the faction theme is. But I mean, we'll talk about it later in the Invitational. I played against Golden Company Swordsman 3 times in a row in the Invitational, and I wasn't really scared for a single second. Like, there are very clear ways to play around them. And and that's just why Renly side is very sad. Standard side, I think, is better, but it's specifically and exclusively because they have Lightbringers. And long-range shooting is good. Long-range shooting is very, very good. And on top of that, Lightbringers also happen to be a pretty decent counter into one of the other best shooting units in the game, which happens to be Captain Crossbows. You're really capitalizing on that bad morale. And what Baratheons need, I don't know exactly what it is that they need, but they need something different. And I don't care if this is a 5-point unit, a 6-point unit, or a 7-point unit. It's a melee infantry slot in arguably the faction that has the most varieties of melee infantry. And unless they have some crazy set of abilities, like if they have Set for Charge and Swift Strike at the same time, okay, now I'm actually interested, because that's actually really stupid and crazy. But it needs to be, I personally think it needs to be that level of stupidness for it to change the way Baratheons play and take Baratheons from, in my opinion, being one of the worst factions in the game to actually bettering them.
I mean, if they Set for Charge would be the kind of more obvious, immediate thing to go for, and then that just enables like a King in the South Renly style of like, I have Swift Strike on Renly, and I have Set for Charge on the Halberdiers. You now can no longer tie my Halberdiers down. That's huge. Like that is big.
Yeah. It's massive for objectives as well, because if you're standing on the middle objective and you're 1 inch forward from where the objective is, anyone who charges you, you just go, okay, cool, lol, poke, and boop, I'm still holding the objective, you can't do shit about me. I'm fine, I'm scoring those points, and as a Baratheon player, that kind of allows you to get that initial, get the points up, start scoring those points. Because, especially Renly side, you can't Alpha Strike. Like, you have 0 Alpha Strike capability in the faction. You have Riders of High... Yeah, you have Riders of High Garden, but, like, they shouldn't ever be doing work. 1 weakened token and they cry. Like, I've never seen a unit cry that much when they get a weakened token. Then. It's a shame. It's a shame.
Yeah, you could definitely play this with a Renly if this come with Set for Charge. I find it really difficult because like combos like that are just big, relatively big negative play experiences. So I think for that reason alone, I'm actually going to almost call it now. Don't see them having Set for Charge because of this combo. We talked about Taunt being an option. Maybe Shield Wall. They do have big shields. Didn't really talk about that in their wording, but I could maybe see it. Shield Wall would be good in Baratheon, maybe.
Here's actually the thing, and I'm actually not being sarcastic when I say this. If they were 10-10-4 and had Shield Wall, that would be interesting. And I know that sounds crazy.
Right? At 7 points?
Yeah. 6 or 7. 6 would really be pushing it. But I think that would be interesting.
Maybe. 10-10-4 would be 10-10-4 would be pushed for 6.
Yeah. It would be, but also melee infantry.
Yeah. Like if they're coming in at 7, if you're looking at a 7-point melee infantry unit.
Yeah.
But for me, I don't think they can be a 7-point melee infantry unit because you're now just directly competing with stags.
Yeah.
I think they have to come in at 6. I actually think they have to come in at 6 now. With the reduction of Sentinels to 5.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And 6-point units are just, it's a weird spot because the majority of shooting units are in that exact same spot. And you're competing with shooting. And shooting is just so good.
Would you take Halberdiers? And it's Lannisters are a different concept, but would you take Lannister Halberdiers let's put them up to a Baratheon 3+ armor. So you make old Halberdiers a 3+ armor. And then maybe change set for charge into something like stand your ground and something like, I don't know, taunt. It could be anything else. It could be like vulnerable token, something like that. Or a weakened token. For 6 points.
No.
No.
Like, it's fun. It's fun, and if you want to have some fun with Jaime Commander, then that would be really funny.
But no.
But no.
So these are probably going to be a disappointment at 6, aren't they?
I think so. If they make it 6. Given how much they're hyping up the eliteness of them, I would very much laugh if they turn out to be 7.
Yep.
That would be big sadness.
I'd be interesting to see what movement they come out at, because I think if they're cheap infantry at movement 5, Stannis side likes that. I think Stannis side wants something like I'm not saying Renly uses them, but the pikemen at movement 5 are better.
I mean, you can even go a step further. Make them the only unit in the game with 3-up armor move 6.
Could do.
3-up armor move 6, tanky and speedy. Now that's actually something considerable. Like, because again, if they're coming in at 6 points, if you're talking about Stannis, you have to be able to argue for them as opposed to Lightbringers.
Yeah.
And that's really, really, really tough. You have to be very, very, very good because of the inherent weaknesses that come with melee. You have to be really, really, really good to be considered above. It's why there's no Lannister City Watch. I just don't care about at all. Because if you're looking at the other 6-point Lannister slots, Red Cloaks, who I don't think are very particularly good, are far more interesting.
Yeah.
Because they actually have impact at range. No.
Maybe.
Move 6, 3 armor would be interesting. I think it breaks their theme a little bit, but I mean, they already broke their theme when they decided to make Starfall Knights, who, by the way, are the best landscape in the game. When they decided to make them armor 4, speed 6, which is unheard of before that. So just go a step further. Yep. Armor 3, 6 speed. I promise you, it's not going to break the game. I promise you. And if they were to break the game, it's because of the other abilities they happen to have that stack.
Yeah.
3-up armor move 6 on melee infantry is not going to break the game.
I think a 3-up armor on move 6 melee infantry definitely be interesting, and it would make defensive units more playable.
Yeah.
Specifically that defensive unit playable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If these were just copy and paste Lannister Halberdiers, would they be worth it over Wardens or Pikemen? Yeah, so over Wardens, probably yes. Because Wardens have the problem of being move 4.
Yeah.
Like, genuinely, movement 4 on the Wardens just makes them so difficult to be proactive with. The set for charge is important. If they were literally copy and paste Lannister Halberdiers, Baratheons would use it. I believe Baratheons would use
it. Yeah. I think that's very fair. 1-inch movement is massive, and especially in round 1 when it comes to just positional setup. If you're a 5-inch unit, if you take the horses and you do a march, you get onto the middle objective round 1, and that's just a really big deal. It's a really, really, really big deal.
All right then. We spent a long time talking about Baratheon Halberdiers.
We really did, which is ironic.
Ironic. It's all right. Remember, you too can have creative ways and means of destroying your enemies that become available, all because Baratheon Halberdiers.
Thought you were going to say all because you're illiterate.
That too. All right then. Let's move on. Hang on, what people saying? These are just copy and paste. Yeah. Set for charge plus final strike could be brutal. Yes. Renly's side would have 4 different 5-point melee infantry units if these were 5 points. Indeed, Mads, and that would be sad. We laugh, but don't Starks have something like they had 6 different melee, 6 different options at 6, which is like crazy.
Yeah.
Starks, Lannisters had a lot as well for a period of time.
You know what? You know what I would love? Baratheon Halberdiers, just make them copy paste Castle Rock on a god.
That would be.
We base Castle Rock on a god.
7. Yeah. So Starks have 7 options. And you can't. And I disagree. Like I fundamentally disagree that it's like, oh, but they're all different. Like, okay, let's go through the list. Tully Sworn Shields are your defensive melee infantry. Okay. Stark Bowmen are your range unit at 6. Fine. Berserkers are your aggressive unit at 6. Okay. I'm fine with this. Cavalry? No, we've got She-Bears. Utility at 6? Bit weird. Okay. Melee only. Carstark Spearmen. Defensive at 6? We've got Tully Cavalier. Tully Shields. Okay, whatever. Let's move on to then Cavalry. No, Mormon Bruisers at 6, who are an aggressive piece, because they're definitely not a support piece. They don't do anything unless they're engaged. Oh, I don't know. And then finally we get Stark Outriders, your cavalry. Yeah.
And the irony of it is, all those 7 units you just spoke about are worse than Bolton Cutthroats.
Pretty much worse than Bolton Cutthroats, yeah. I mean, She-Bears are the only one there that sees any real, consistent high level, or when I say high level, I don't mean high competitive level. I literally mean a high level of appearance. What else? I mean, I say Starks. Lannisters just had a few things changed, of course, with Halberdiers going down. They had Mountains Men, Crossbowmen, Red Cloaks, City Watch, and Brigands. Obviously, used to have your Halberdiers at 6 as well. They've only got 6 optional. Had 6. Now they've gone down to 5.
Yeah.
So yeah, you say that there are 4 different 5-point melee infantry. If these are 5 points, says Mads. Yes, it isn't great, Mads. But also there are factions that kind of have that nearly already. All right. Anyway, let's move on. Invitational. Cajo, Isaac, how did you enjoy it? First of all, did you enjoy it?
I really did. I really did. I went there with the mindset and the expectation of I got invited, and that was quite frankly just the biggest Song of Ice and Fire honor I could have imagined. I started playing this game 10 months ago, and I wanted to get into competitive. I wanted to get to a high level. And my expectation was, if I really grind and really learn this game and learn from very good players, then maybe in 2 years' time, I can win a GT. And 10 months in, I've been invited to the Invitational. I never would have expected that. And it really meant a lot. It really did. And going there, I had the mindset of, it doesn't matter how I do. It doesn't matter how I do. I'm here and I'm playing against against top-rated players. Ironically, I actually played against 3 international players, which was really fun, given that everyone else of the UK players in the Invitational I've played against before. Some on multiple occasions, some only once or so. It was really great, really great. And so I went there with the expectation of round 1 is going to be really tough. Forest Pond, a very, very good player. And I've only played against him once before, and he absolutely steamrolled me. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just see what happens. I'm going to play my best. And I blinked a few times, and then suddenly it was at the end. And I found myself staring into a camera for 2 minutes that I thought was taking pictures. Turns out it was actually recording for the YouTube. Hence the semi kind of, but also definitely awkward, just direct staring with a bit of a robotic smile.
No, forget that video.
If you go back and watch it, if you actually know that I thought you can now tell that I thought they was taking pictures.
I also did. Yeah, but it's so obvious that you did. Now I think about it, like you hold that like moment so long. Oh, that was So go on. So Game Against Forest was great, yeah.
Yeah.
You enjoyed that one. I mean, obviously, I played Forest in the main event as well, so Forest is a lovely bloke. You played Nixie round 2.
Yes.
You're on. How did that? I mean, it looks like it was. it's difficult because you say it's a close game 4-3, but then you see it's a wipeout, so it's not that close a game.
Yep.
Was it just knights go brr, then the knights died, and then Kevin went brr?
No, I think all 3 games were very, very interesting. This game was, and we spoke about the game as well. The lists I took is I went double Kevin. I took an 8-act Kevin build, and I took a 7-act Kevin build. The idea is that 8-act Kevin is just ridiculously good, and 7-act Kevin is my idea of an anti-Night's Watch counter. What I've learned is that double crossbows with Tywin Bomb and Turncoat just absolutely eats Golden Company's swordsman for dinner. And so then when each of my rounds, my opponents were, I think, if I remember correctly, they had Golden Company swordsman in both lists, but maybe it was just one.
GCS and Forest.
Yeah.
No GCS in his Oberyn. Did run GCS in the Daemon.
Yeah.
And then I know that Sophie does.
Yeah, exactly. And it just so happens to be a very, 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 very strong combo into Golden Company Swordsman, because just if we go through the math, you take a wound from a Turncoat. Okay, that's 1 wound, you put out a vulnerable token. You then do the Tywin Bomb, on average, because you're on a 4-up armor, and we're talking about Golden Company Swordsman here. You take 2 more wounds, you spend the vulnerable token, do 1 more wound on average. That's now 4 wounds out of 12, and I give you another vulnerable token. I delete your ability so you lose Iron Resolve and all of your stuff and bullshit. I then they make you take a panic test with a panic token. If you fail it, lol. If you don't, I don't really care. Then it doesn't really matter what I do from there. You've taken 4 wounds, you double token, you've lost abilities you can't be targeted by tacticals or orders for the turn. If you've done what Flixie ended up doing, which was marching up your Golden Company swordsman to be in short range of crossbows, I then just take swords, I attack, or I also, as part of my star turn things, I do Tyrion to guarantee I put all Hear Me Roar into my hand. And then I shoot you 6 on 3s, re-rolling, you're looking at 5 to 6 hits. Then you're looking at all those saves on 5s with a vulnerable token, panic test with a panic token with a Hear Me Roar, you're going to be looking at a 9. You are dying. You can get a little bit lucky and survive, but you are dying. And that just that's 7 points, and usually a commander bunker as well. That's just down the drain. And when you're able to deliver that threat, like the second I killed the Golden Company swordsman against Flixie, I just won the game. Like, we played it out, but unless I make a big mistake, there is no coming back from that.
Yeah.
Just no coming back from that.
That's fair. Yeah,
and it's why this tournament, because ironically enough, I played against Baratheons far more than I thought I would. Over the 10 games of the weekend, I played Baratheon 3 times. Every single time was against double Renly. And just my big conclusion of that is Renly is still really bad. But also, if you do want to make Renly work, because I don't think Renly's unplayably bad, I just think he's much worse than Stannis.
Yeah.
However, you should be running Golden Company crossbows, not the swordsman, I think.
Okay.
Because it gives you that range output and that range threat.
Johannes there in chat says GCS were a mistake. Definitely should have run the Oberyn.
Yeah. And the Oberyn list is the one I was expecting Johannes to run. That's the one I was kind of mentally preparing myself for. And then once the game, because Starfall Knights, as I said earlier, best lance came in the game, so that's actually something that I need to worry about and think about, because they are a really, really good unit. Sand Skirmishers with Spear Launch is very, very good. Outriders, that gives them double cav and a pseudo shooting cav, which is really not bad. And then Oberyn just doing whatever. But with that unit composition, he can actually play around my double crossbows in a bit of an interesting way. Whereas with the other list, where there's 2 just melee infantry blocks, 1 light cav, which doesn't really do much, and a good shooting unit. The game is out on YouTube. Rotterdam White Scars did a great job and record all the games to a really, really good quality. Highly recommend checking the game out, because I think Lannister players and Martell players can really learn a lot from it. I also think a lot of players as well, because his Golden Company swordsmen never made it to combat. They just never made it to combat. And that's not to say that I deleted them in one turn, because he fell into that trap. He didn't. But they never made it into combat. And that's what you can do against Golden Company swordsmen.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the game, guys, do watch it out on Rotten White Scar's YouTube channel. Hopefully, now that the first game is out, people will see the production value and what they've kind of got going on. And I like their setup. I think it's nice, it's clean, it's simple, it works. And you can clearly see what's going on and hear what's said as well. Although there is also a little bit of background as well. Nature of playing in a crowded hall with like 1,000 players.
At some point, you can hear a particularly annoying and short person shouting that he effing hates Lannisters. I'm not sure who that was.
Oh,
but just some.
That was definitely. I think I walked past behind. I think my game had already finished, and I remember walking past your game.
Yeah.
I think I just literally said like, I fucking hate Lannisters, because I just played into them, and then I saw this game and you were winning, and I was like, oh Christ, I'm probably gonna have to play against you. And I think I at this point already knew I was playing Sophie.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, 100%. And of the 3 games, I really enjoyed all 3 of them. I think my favourite game was probably the round 1 game against Forest. It had the most moving parts. It was the... how do I say this? It was the one I felt in most threat under. I never really felt as afraid at certain points. Like, there's one point you can actually watch the video as well. There's one point where I'm literally, like, because I was rewatching it back to kind of recap the game and stuff. And there's a point in the game where I literally do not move an inch for 2 straight minutes. I'm just standing there, hands on the. I honestly thought that the camera had glitched or something until you actually see Forrest moving on the other side. But I'm just standing dead still for 2 minutes, just trying to think through every single option. Eventually finding an option that ended up really, really working. But it was a really cool game in that way, because it really wasn't an easy one. And even though the score ended 10-1, it was not a blowout at all. It was really not.
Interesting. All right then. So obviously you ate it through. Obviously played Sophie in the final. Kevin mirror match, except Sophie's Kevin is. I mean, she runs it with the Golden Company Swordsman with Kevin, which you've kind of already spoken about, like the effectiveness of Tywin just shuts this down. Did you run the 7 or the 8 into?
I ran the 7. I ran the 7. Yeah.
In which case you just shut Kevin down and then just win, basically.
Yeah. What was really interesting about that game is, because I did find it really fun and interesting as well, is that the entire game turned into a waiting game. And I'm not necessarily going to spoil it to anyone who wants to watch it. However, it's like, hey, you're watching this stream first. That's your choice. So maybe spoilers ahead.
Also, people know the results.
Exactly. But basically, it was one of the cagiest games that I've ever played, in the sense of, I think, round 1, round 2, and round 3. The only thing that was happening was making sure that each unit's lance cav can't get guaranteed value out. Each player's lance cav weren't getting value. Each player's crossbows weren't getting value. And each player's predictable maneuvers isn't going to absolutely screw the other person over. And it was just that very, very, very delicate dance. The difference is, I have a Tywin bomb and a tankard. And at a certain point, I don't care about predictable. Like, predictable is which is crazy, because predictable is a very, very, very good card. But just by waiting it out round by round by round, and using Tyrion to draw exactly the cards I need for each of the situations, like, I ended up having all the cards I needed for every situation because of Tyrion. Because I very quickly saw in round 1, I'm going to need this card. then I'm going to need this card. So round 1, round 2, discard the cards I don't want, and I'm drawing those ones. My poor fellows, they were kind of just playing super cagey, because another big thing as well is that I'm very, very, very aware that in terms of points on the board, Sophie has more than me, because I have Tywin. And that is something I really, really, really have to think about. I really, really have to consider that. Because if I let Sophia get ahead just a little bit on points, if the game then turns into a really, really cagey defensive game, which Lannisters can really do quite well in certain contexts, I just instantly lose. So I knew that the second I pick up, because it was Dance of Dragons as well, I knew the second I pick up just a few tokens, I win. And it was just waiting it out until I was able to take, like, one of my favourite moments from the game. It was just this little, just almost light bulb that just popped in my head when it came up. My opponent took horses. I did a Varys shift to pick up the token. The reason I didn't do it before is because after I move up to pick up the token, I'm within Kevin's charge range. I then immediately shoot with Tyrion and shift back just enough so I'm outside of Kevin's shoot range. So shifting forward with Varys and immediately shifting back to take the shot out of his range. And at that point, I know I'm ahead and I'm really in the dominating position here. Now, then what also turns out is that because, yes, we both are predictable and crossbows are very, very good, but without anything very scary being put on my knights, like, you know, something like seeing their flaws, I can eat a Bronbow shot. I can just eat a Bronbow shot, it's fine. And so predictable isn't super duper duper scary. And because of the way that the board was lined out, with kind of the other Kevin being on one flank, eventually, because activations work that way, I was just able to just move and march my Lance Cav after the crossbows and Kevin had activated. On that side, very, very close to Kevin. I'm going first next round. Time bomb, turncoat. You know how the rest goes.
Yep.
And it was just waiting it out.
Okay. Interesting. So, congratulations again on your
Thank you.
Your lovely sword.
Yes.
Your second UK player, which I'm very glad about, to win the Invitational. So well done for that. Main event then, obviously that was the Invitational itself, and thanks again to Carlo for putting that on. Main event then. How did the main event go for you in terms of, like, not the games, but in terms of the actual event itself?
The actual event itself, that's a good question. I really enjoyed it. It was a really, really good and fun event. I really liked the inclusion of the clocks.
Okay.
I think the problem was not the clocks themselves, it's the communication around the clocks. That's what went wrong, in my opinion. There was at no point in any of my games where I thought there was any problem with clocks. Going up in the lead up to the tournament, I was one of the people who really did not like the idea of a clock. And the fact of the matter was, there was no clear guideline on how it would work. Like, me and a friend, we decided to have a game just before the LGT, just practice. We started the game, and I kid you not, like 10 minutes in, we went, this actually doesn't work with a clock. Which is, what do we do when we reach the end round cleanup phase? Do we pause the clock? Do we keep it on someone's time randomly? And I think that Carlo's ruling was really, really, really good, what he did for the Invitational, which is whoever's going first the next round, it's on their turn. It's on their time. I think that's a really good way of doing it. I think the clocks really added a lot to the games. Like, the clocked games were probably my favourite games, to be honest. It was really fun to have that kind of efficiency in the back of your mind. I really, really, really enjoyed it. Venue was amazing. Location was amazing as well. We weren't amongst the sweaty 40k players. We actually were, in our own little space, which was really, really, really nice. Close to some former Imperial Assault friends I had as well. It was a fun little coincidence as well. They were playing Legion, so I got the chance to catch up with them for the first time in a few years, which was really good fun. And yeah, food was great. The people were great. We had not as many people as I would have hoped, but still a big tournament. Like 58 people is definitely respectable. and got to meet a few international faces who I'd spoken to online but never actually met in person, which was really good. Like, if I could do it again, I would in a heartbeat, 100%.
Okay. So on the topic of clocks, because I have got a question
Mm-hmm.
around that, we spoke about clocks last week, and I'm not going to regurgitate the whole discussion that I'd had with Sophie last week about clocks.
Mm-hmm.
You said there that you enjoyed playing under clocks.
Mm-hmm.
Your first experience of doing so in a competitive event. Would you say that the clocks changed your play, or do you think that actually the clocks, rather than changing your play, actually just allowed you the ability to make a decision and feel as though you would need to stick with it? If you know what I mean. It added resolve to your decision making, if you will.
It's a good point. I actually haven't thought about that. I think that is true. I think one of the biggest things for me about the clock was how much more it made me focus.
Okay.
It really made me focus, and it gave me far more ownership over my own turn and ownership over the nature of the clock itself. And what I mean by that is there are certain decisions which are so important in the game that have so many consequences that sometimes you just need to take 2 minutes to think about it. And taking 2 minutes to think about it when there's half an hour left on the clock is a bit of a feels bad for both players. Like, the person who's against that player is kind of, well, come on, mate, just make your goddamn decision. And the person who's doing it also has that kind of feeling of, well, I can't take too long because that would be unfair towards my opponent. But just setting these very set boundaries where this is your time, this is my time, it means that if I want to do something on my time, I can do it. And ironically enough, because I had that freedom almost in a way to make that choice, I didn't need to as much.
Yeah.
Like, so much more of my mental capacity was going towards the actual difficult decisions. And because of the clocks, my round one was basically just thought out in advance anyway, more so than usual.
Yes.
And that was a really nice thing to have, because I haven't really had that before, where I've thoroughly thought through my round one before the game really even starts, and kind of almost playing on autopilot for round one.
That is by far one of my favourite things in the box, is that round one, the terrain and setup and things like that still takes time. Round one just happening, like, way faster than it needs to be, or way faster than it normally is, I should say, is just much better. Because people take an inordinate amount of time on round one sometimes, and it's just simply not required. It's ironically the time where your decision making matters the most, and the time when you have the most impact with your decision making for the rest of the game. But it's also the only turn in the game where there is very little interaction with your opponent.
Yeah.
So therefore, also very little interaction with what you can do and what your opponent can do. Like,
100%.
Like you said, you should already know what your round one looks like based on where you deploy loot units.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And Johannes says, completely agree on the clock. Match feels fairer and you become a better player.
Yeah.
And they make the games more fun and interesting. Which, I know mine and Johannes' game, partially due to clocks, was more fun because of that. So, yeah, exactly. Clocks positive. All right, then. Games at the LGT, then. So that's he talks about clocks and talks about all that.
Mm-hmm.
Games at the LGT, are there any particular games you wanted to highlight that you...
I think there were three particular standout games.
Okay.
The biggest one by far would be the one that it was the only Lannister mirror I played in the main event, which would be against Reek rhymes with leak, or the other way around. I can never remember which way it actually goes.
It's Reek rhymes with...
okay, fair enough.
Nas, as he's known from Denmark.
Yes. Exactly. So he played a 8 activation Tyrion list against my 7-act double crossbows. The reason I went for the 7 double crossbows is because Nas's other list that he could have taken was Gregor with Golden Company Swordsman, and like we've said, Golden Company Swordsman with Tywin is just laughable. So, and I feel quite comfortable going into I don't feel comfortable going into a Kevin 8 with a Kevin 7, but I feel very comfortable going into a Lannister 8 with a Kevin 7, if it's just any other commander, and Tyrion was very much that. It was a really good game, and it was a crushing loss for myself. But the game had several learning points, I think, for me. One is Tyrion's actually really not bad. Like, Tyrion really effed me over. Not being able to retreat with my Lancecav off horses after my Lancecav got charged by his Lancecav is absolutely disgusting and atrocious, and should basically be a war crime. And on top of that as well, the biggest swing of the game by far, and it was because I was ahead. I was objectively ahead. We both had this conversation. I was ahead in every conceivable way. I'd killed his crossbows. I was ahead on points. I was ahead on positioning. I'd nullified everything that he realistically could do. However, at one point when I retreated with my knights, when my knights were aligned 50-50, I retreated an inch. I did not pivot to make my center face the center. That allowed his knights to maneuver by a millimeter into my flank, to charge my flank, which obviously far more damage. But even on top of far more damage, gets them outside of Kevin's shooting, because Kevin was otherwise going to be shooting them in the flank if they charged the front of my knights. And that just lost me the game. Then we both agreed there was some kind of silly rolls, such as Gregor two-shotting poor fellows and stuff like that. But, stuff like that can happen. It's not crazy luck, it's unlucky, but, it can happen. But it was that miss retreat. Because if I pivot, I'm not kidding when I say a millimeter, I'm good.
Yep.
I'm good. And it was a good learning opportunity, because over time, when you play this game, you make these god-awful, stupid mistakes, and they hurt you enough that you never forget them. One of my first ever games with Song of Ice and Fire was against Marky Stats, and I was new to the game. I played bribery. I stood on swords in round 1, and I played bribery. Marky went, cool. I'll go take bags and I'll remove bribery. That facepalm moment has stuck with me for the last 300 games or whatever it's been since then, and I've never made that mistake again.
Yep.
Ever. And it's the same thing here. Like, I know whenever you retreat, I know mathematically, if you're 100% and you retreat an inch, it is impossible for a 5-inch cavalry unit to reach your rear. Like, just mathematically speaking, they can't do it. Your flank. Mathematically, they can't do it. It's not going to happen. But when you're 50-50, that's not the case. And I know that might seem ridiculously obvious to a lot of people, but there's one thing knowing something, and there's another actually having it set as a rule for the game in your head, as a checklist of things to remember whilst playing the game. That was really, really useful. Obviously, mistakes will always happen. Sometimes you do brain farts and you do stupid things, and that'll always happen. Doesn't matter if you're the best player in the world or the worst. You'll always make mistakes. But it was a really good learning opportunity to remember that specific play, because had I not done that, I just would have won.
Yeah.
I just would have won.
That's fair. That was one of the 3 games you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Same game, balls against yourself. There's nothing more demoralizing than losing a game and then going up against the number one ranked player in the UK right afterwards. And we joked about it. And we also joked about a very similar thing for the next day, because going into day 2, myself, Marky Mark, and Jacob, and I don't think it's too controversial to say that all those 3 players are quite highly rated, were 2-2. which is just hilarious. And I can just imagine the face of someone who's, it's their first big tournament or something like that, and they go to and they're super happy, they think they've dodged all the competitive players, and they just see, 1875. And let's also remember what those lists, what those three players were running. We have super meta disgusting Night's Watch. We have double Kevin crossbows, and then we have Free Folk Faramir.
although one of Jacob's lists is a bit off meta with his that
Yes. Yeah, the man's list is off meta. But I just found it really funny. And it was the same thing going into your game. Like, my face just fell. And I think both of our faces fell.
I was a bit like, what the fuck?
Yeah. The big takeaway of that game is I did learn something, which is Kevin 8 is not as good into Free Folk as I thought. One of the reasons I was still running Kevin 8 as one of my two lists is because I honestly thought that was a good counter into Free Folk. And even though it served me well into a lot of Free Folk opponents, at the end of the day, you are number 2 ranked in the world for a reason, and you play Free Folk like no one else does. And that is why you won, for example, US Nationals, whilst scoring less points than the average calories that a cat has when it's being starved.
I didn't expect that analogy. I appreciate that.
Yes, I'm glad. But no. The game that we had was not a game, and there were a few reasons for that. The lists were not necessarily the reason. You said it when we started the game, and I very much agree with you that specific matchup, holy moly, whoever wins the first roller for the game has a ridiculous and disgusting advantage. If you put...
Yeah. So I will just straight up say it, like, I think if you win the match, if you win the dice roll, there's a game to be played.
Yeah.
If I win the dice roll...
That's not. That's not.
I don't really see what you can do, to be honest.
Yeah. And after that interesting experience, I very much feel the same. I really do. What happened is the first roll-off of the game, for anyone who didn't clock it, is roll-off for terrain. If I win, the central objective, because this was always also the castle walls, 100 ready. So, which means there's a middle objective. If I go first, the middle objective is either going to be blocked by a palisade or a corpse pile. One of the two. What really surprised me over the tournament is that I did double corpse pile almost every single game. Double palisade almost every single game. And once you've had a taste of palisades, there really isn't any going back. Holy, they are so good. Like there was this picture I took in my first game. Actually, while I'm talking about this, I'll send it to you, Mickey, in case you want to show it as well, because I think it's a perfect example of this. But anyway, so in that game, against your somewhat good self, we actually, let's just see if we can find the picture real quick.
So, first of all, 100 Ready's hilarious because it's the only game mode you can't put palisades down on.
Yeah, which really pisses me off.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any goddamn sense, by the way. Like, we have an inch of the board on either side that can't be covered, and apparently it would now be super unfair if you could cover even more.
It's not even like, I think it might be an inch and a half, So it's a long...
It's stupid. It's absolutely stupid. But anyway, if I place the first piece of terrain, it's either going to be a palisade or a corpse pile. Either of those things means that my opponent is not going to be able to safely hold the middle objective, because I don't care if you put mag there. I don't care if you put Ian with resilience down there. I'm going to shoot the shit out of you, and you are going to die. So you can't do that. And that means there's a game to be played. Because my poor fellows are ridiculously squishy. I can't put them on flank objectives. Your raiders, exact same life choice. So now it's actually going to be a positioning game, and positioning games are the best games. Positioning games are really, really good fun. If you win the roll-off, you do exactly what you did, which is you put a forest in the middle, and you win. Because there's no mathematical way that I'm likely, I'm not going to kill you. But with a forest, you can put mag in the middle, you can cover the middle objective, and you can be completely covered by the forest. My Kevin is never going to touch you. if I put my halberdiers there, you're just going to mince me because you don't care about the armor debuff. And that's what ended up happening. And the only chance I have is I use Tyrion to pull Seeing Their Flaws into my hand, and I get lucky. I charge with my knights into your front. 10 dice on 3s, re-rolling. You're saving on 4s with a vulnerable. Panic on a 4 with a panic token. And if you fail, I probably win. Maybe. It's not good odds, but I might do.
But you need all of that to come off.
I need all of that to come off in one go. And if it's not in one go, there's not even any point. And yeah, so that was big sadness. It did kind of the reason I find that game interesting is that it gave me two very key takeaways. First being double Kevin, even while I think it is from a power perspective the strongest thing that Lannisters can do. From a meta perspective, there are better things to do, I think. And even though I still think that Gregor is one of the worst commanders in Lannister, I don't think he's particularly good at all. Gregor might have fringe play into Free Folk and into the new 6-act Stark build that's been throwing around.
Yeah, or even to some extent, Greyjoys as potential. On that note, you've got this palisade set up here. I know you wanted to talk about it.
Yeah. So this was my game against my round 1 opponent. Super great guy. He was running Greyjoys. Greyjoys with no shooting. Greyjoys with no Windermere. Greyjoys with no Varys. Greyjoys with no cavalry. To anyone who is of the opinion that melee infantry playstyles with no tricks or buffs is a reliable way of winning games, then I will just give you this picture as an example. So, what have we got here? This is start of round 2. My opponent is going first. Because I'm going first round 1, I'm taking horses to deny him from pushing up further in the board. And I don't care if he takes hunters, because he's not. With this setup, I can just do exactly what I did here. If we go from the left side of the screen to the right, the poor fellows are blocked by the palisade. The unit that's directly above them cannot charge them, because they would be crossing the palisade, so that's an illegal charge. Tyrion, who is in crossbows. Oh, isn't he? No, Tyrion Halberdiers, yeah. Tyrion Halberdiers. He is outside of 12. He's outside 12 of both of the units. So even with the Auto 6 charge card from Victorian Commander, which is what my opponent was running, you can't do anything. Kevin, much closer, and is protected by the palisade, so can't be charged in the front. His flank is also protected by Gregor, and Gregor's front is also protected by the palisade, so he can't be charged either. And then the Knights of Castle Rock, they are more than 11 inches away from the Reavers there on the right, so they can't do anything. My opponent then, I can't even remember what my opponent did, but he did not take horses round 1. So he did not take horses start of round 2. And so I stand Baelish on horses, and I use a token for literally anything else, and I just know that I've won this game at that point. I just have. Because his round 2 alpha is going to do absolutely nothing. And the best thing he can do, which he ended up doing, is, he goes, I have assault orders, so I'll just march up and I'll just get an assault orders. It's something. That shoots death before he touches combat. Like, he marches up, I do Seeing Your Flaws, Kevin shoots him in the flank, he's down to a rank. If he charges Tyrion, then lol.
Yeah.
Just set for charge you did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, welcome to why melee infantry is bad.
Correct.
And
it's why, if you are a Greyjoy player, and I don't think Greyjoys are terrible. I think they're bad, but I don't think they're absolutely unplayably terrible. I think you should be running Varys and Windermere in every single list. Every single list. Varys and Windermere, and you take Balon as well, because Balon is objectively amazing. Objectively amazing. For 5 points.
It's interesting.
Those shifts is what you need.
It's interesting because you play in a similar manner to what I tried to do. which a lot of other players do as well, but less so, I think, which is controlling. Controlling in a manner that isn't about controlling as in saying no, although you do have that with Lannister.
Yeah.
Controlling in a sense of like literally making your opponent have choices, but merely all of the choices are choices you've let them have.
Yeah.
Like, you can do this thing, and it's okay if you do this thing.
Yeah.
But that is actually all you can do. Like, you don't have a great number of options outside of that, because they're all worse than that thing. So you should do the thing that's, like, not very bad for you. And that's what I want you to do. And that's going to end up being bad for you in the long run. So yeah, you just put people in positions to do only really kind of like mediocre things.
Yeah. And that's really been the big thing for me. When I first got into competitive tabletop games, I was 14 years old, and I got into because I always loved board games, and I just happened to be a tournament nearby, and I thought, well, not really nearby. It was an extern. I lived in London, so I was lucky enough to be able to convince my father to drive me there. It was very, very kind. And went to my first tournament, had amazing fun, and I was just hooked. And that was when I was 14 years old, so now quite a while since then. And I've just been loving it ever since. And one of the big learning points for me, because I always played long-range control. Like, not always, but when I started to get good at the game, when I started playing that. And that was my playstyle. And when I found this game, I saw, so my ideal playstyle is long-range control with heavy card draw. I took one look at Lannisters, which also happens to be my favourite faction from a theme perspective. And they have crossbows, they have Kevin, they have Tyrion NCU, and they have the best control in the game. And I was just hooked. And one of the biggest learning points for me about running control is it's not even necessarily about running control, it's just about running any game inherently. And that is control what your opponent can and can't do. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds super simple and super obvious, but so few people do it. So few people do it. Because what that means, controlling what someone can and can't do is set up a position where your opponent will lose whatever they do. And when I say position, that means positioning. And if you can learn how to position well in any game, like I promise you, in any game that's not a completely janky, dice-based luck game, the player who position, which means like 40k and 50% of games out there, but unless you're playing one of those games where it just comes down to dice, positioning is going to win you the game. That was the case in Imperial Assault, and that's the case in Song of Ice and Fire. If you position well, you are going to win the game. Why do I love shooting? Several reasons. It's fun. Your opponent cries when you do it.
Of course it is.
But also, shooting is the least luck-based attack that you can perform in the game. Because you don't care if you roll a 1. There's no such thing as a disorderly shot.
No.
There is no such thing as a disorderly shot. And you know what? With Baelish, if you whiff an attack, you don't care, because you have at least 2 more anyway. And with the volume of dice you roll, your crossbows, or your lightbringers, or your Dreadfoot spearmen, Dreadfoot archers, don't run Dreadfoot spearmen, they're goddamn awful. Or Golden Company's crossbows. You shoot enough and you will win the game. And you will never be in the position where if you roll a 1, you lose the game. And that's why I like them. And I understand why some people might say, well, shooting is broken for that reason. I don't think shooting is broken. I think shooting is what the game should be at. I think melee is just shit. The whole concept, in my opinion, the whole concept of a disorderly charge, if it's an auto charge, I think it's the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my entire life.
I like it, because it means that it doesn't add guarantee. But I do think that there should be more ways of curtailing range. And by that I mean removing rerolls from ranged attacks is the obvious thing to do.
Mhm.
Crossbows gaining rerolls on the short range is literally as equivalent. Like 6 dice on 3s is like what an infantry unit at 5 points might put out, or
Yeah.
an infantry unit at 6 points might put out. 6 dice on 3s with rerolls that doesn't require positioning anymore to get into melee combat.
Yeah.
Is just objectively better than most melee infantry.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider you also have Sundering.
Yeah.
So like, it's really difficult because like, yes, charging is not necessarily great, but like 6 dice on 3s with rerolls with Sundering is really equivalent to nearly most melee infantry charges anyway.
Yeah.
At that kind of points level. The trade-off is, of course, the defensive stats, but the defensive stats don't matter if you can't be engaged. What I actually
Hello,
think,
Palisades.
yeah, so Palisades, and I think this is a generalized question, and I know there was a Baratheon game you were playing playing Cajo, and I was kind of talking to the player and kind of coaching him a little bit in a Baratheon versus Lannister match.
Yes, I remember that.
Now, I didn't like the Baratheon list, but what the prevailing kind of wisdom for me of that game was all about was that like you're in a bad position because your list isn't. I just don't like this list matchup. But what you can't do is you can't just allow terrain or things that stop you from being effective to exist in the game.
Yeah.
And so it really became like this whole decision making, which put you into a bit of a hole on round 1 thinking, into round 2 thinking, because of literally just marching all the way up to Palisade and just going, I'm going to break this at my first opportunity.
Yeah.
And it presented an issue for you that you didn't at that time know how to solve.
Yeah.
And when someone's game plan is predicated around something like that, you have to disrupt their game plan. Like, this is actually the vice versa of the control side. You
Exactly.
can't let someone control you. You have to do things that they don't want you to do. And if that means doing stuff that's risky, but will pay off if it goes well, take the risk. Because otherwise you're just going to be in the controlled basket all game.
Yeah.
And you're playing into you're playing into what they want. And this is actually the irony of if you're playing against someone cagey, which we'll get onto in a second with, Marky Mark, Night's Watch, and specifically Stark builds that you essentially have issues with. Those control-y aspects predicate themselves around high-level play because high-level play, players won't take risks.
Yeah.
Or at least they won't take undue risks. Sometimes the risk you need to take is risking everything. And when I mean everything, I don't mean everything on one thing. I mean you risk your whole list. You play in a much more aggressive manner than most people would be comfortable with.
Yeah.
In terms of throwing your units forward. Marching up and putting your unit 1 inch away and go on then. What are you going to do? Because now I'm a problem that you have to fix and deal with. But that's again a different way of thinking about the game, different way of playing the game. And it's counterintuitive to a lot of what people want to do. A lot of people are very aggressive and they throw things forward, but they're not throwing it together forward in a coherent plan or strategy.
Yeah, 100%.
They throw a unit forward, and so you just kill it, and then you kill the next one, and then you kill the
exactly. That's really what I found. Really, a lot of players, they have this kind of one at a time. I can't even call it strategy because I don't even think it's a conscious decision. It's just what ends up happening where one unit is funneled at a time. And I'm sorry, I don't care what your unit is. If I've got double crossbows pointing at you, you're gonna die.
I played it. Admittedly, it was a Bolton list, right? So take that with a huge grain of salt.
That is a Bolton-sized grain of salt.
Yeah. It's Bolton's anyway. It might have been neutral, but I'm fairly sure it's Bolton's. I played a game where exactly that happened, and there was a skill disparity between the players, right? I'm not gonna sit here and say that was not a factor. It wasn't the most prevailing factor, but it was a very similar thing. I had a Stark list that was entirely shooting. Like literally every unit is a shooting unit, except I think it's got Grey Wind in it, so I've got like one or two wolves. 2 Palisades on the board. and he ends up repositioning his force across to a side where the two palisades are like center and left. He repositions most of his force to the right, and then tries to come round the edge of the palisade. And I am legitimately not joking. There was a moment. No, he's playing Targs actually. That's why he could reposition easily. There was a moment in the game where my opponent had 4 or 5 combat units, almost in column, coming round the side of the palisade. And I'm not joking. Every single one of his 5 combat units died in about an 8x8 inch box. Because I killed one, and the next one walked in and I killed that. The next one walked in and I killed that. It was like literally the definition of ambushing a column in a video game. On a board. It couldn't get more perfectly. This is just ambushing a column. It was a perfect description of it. And I'm not gonna say it was like, oh, the game was like a really high level game or anything like that. That's not really the point. It was very much an intuitive decision for my opponent to not play the game I wanted to play, so come round the board.
Yeah.
But didn't have a strategy or method of doing so in the right way, so just ended up throwing the game away.
Yeah.
Because they're like, I've got to do something. And constantly in a state of, I've got to do something. Rather than thinking, right, what do I do?
And sometimes, and this is really what I found as well, sometimes that feeling of, I've got to do something is nothing but a goddamn giant trap.
Yeah. 100%.
Sometimes players will do something that surprises you, that sets up a dangerous thing, and you feel like you have to respond. But if you actually take a second and look at the actual situation, in the vast majority of cases, if you originally position well, if your opponent charges into you, you're just going to delete them because you can now charge into their flank because they charge into you, and they probably don't want-shot you.
Yeah.
Units moving up and charging you is scary. It absolutely is. But if Tullycav charged the front of Kevin, then eat a supremacy, and then get a flank charge from my knights, and then start the next round, get a Tywin bomb, and then a Tyrion shot on the flank, I don't care. And obviously that's a very extreme example, like, you as an opponent shouldn't let that happen. But, you know, just because someone can charge you does not mean that that unit is a threat. Sometimes it absolutely is. But, you know, going back to the entire, you know, shooting versus melee discussion, just like charging is not that good. You can flip it on its head, and being charged is fine. It's usually not that scary. If you have a plan to get out of it and not die, there are very few things in the game that can one-shot.
If you're on more health than your opponent can deal damage, taking a charge is actually fine.
Yeah. 100%.
Not a big deal.
No, like the amount of times I will very voluntarily take a 6-up charge with my poor fellows in the hope of just getting a free faith token. Like, that is the thing.
And also, like, the number of times I've sat there and people have gone, "Are you not worried about that raider unit dying?" And I go, "No, pretty sure the maximum damage you can do is about 11. I'm on 12 health. That means I'm not dead. That's fine. Like,
Exactly.
That's literally not important. But you're going to lose an entire unit. No, I'm not going to use an entire unit. I'm going to lose most of a unit."
Exactly. And that most is really important.
Yeah.
That most is really, really important.
It's not the whole thing.
And because what's really funny with the Greyjoy image, with the game that's on screen at the moment, is in that round, after shit started going down, he actually started backing away with his Reavers a little bit. There on the right side. So I went for a 6-up charge with my Lance Cav, because it was just literally like, there's no reason not to. I'm not in any threat at all. I rolled a 6. Yeah.
Indication.
Yeah.
What's actually super interesting is I have been sat here analysing this a little bit, and I'm 99% sure if he goes first on round 2, which he does, if he just takes the horses and position himself next to the palisade, within an inch of it, charge blocking both the knights and Gregor against the palisade edge, yes, you actually can't shift along fully because Gregor's in the way, meaning that your first shot will have to shift forward, and your next 2 inches to the right. So as long as there's an offset of 2 inches from the edge of his tray in the center of yours, at most, I'm actually 99% sure he can move with horses. You're probably not going to take swords, but you kind of have to take swords.
Yeah.
And if he has like a weed or he can just activate and destroy the palisade.
Or even a sword orders. Like, he's got 4 cards in his deck that can form an attack. He's probably got one.
Vic can just front charge Kevin.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely what should have happened. It's still a very beneficial position for myself.
Oh, yeah.
Just massively so. Because the time it'll take him to do that, I will have gotten at least 2 shots off. If not more, because predictable maneuvers is the thing. And I can guarantee predictable maneuvers.
What's actually super interesting is I don't know if you'll be able to actually see him on one of the shots. Interesting. Especially if you position so that your front is facing Gregor and the Knights, because it means if the Knight charge comes in the front, you actually get the flank charge with the...
Oh, I should mean the Reaver going up to the maneuver, not Victorian.
Victorian, yeah.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I think that's fine. The problem is, like, I have Varys shifts, so I don't think there's a way for him to get away. Because if he goes horses, I just Varys, and then after that shift, I'll be able to see him. And I had seeing the flaws in hand as well, which is hilarious. So after the maneuver, I just play that, and then it's goodbye Reavers.
You're probably going to kill the Reavers. Like,
it opens up the center of the board.
He needs to gambit something because he's not winning otherwise.
Exactly. And with Grangers, you can really afford to gambit things. Like, if it costs your opponent resources to kill something, it's really not a bad decision if that then leaves them just popping up into your opponent's deployment on the turn after.
Yeah, because then you get to Balon.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty strong.
Yeah.
All right, then. Any other games you wanted to highlight? We talked massively there about rolling aspects.
Yes. Like there was one more bit of a takeaway game for me, which was against Jacob.
Okay.
Just because I found the game really, really, really funny. In the sense of I killed a cat with Lannister supremacy, which is one of the best feelings in the world. Yep. And it was a really fun game. A really, really, really fun game. Varamir versus... Because I tried, after how our game went, it was my first time trying the Kevin 7 into Free Folk. Sadly for me, he was running Varamir 10, not Varamir 9 like you were, so the activation disparity was definitely a lot more noticeable there. But Varys is stupid. Varys is really, really, really good, and Jacob made one little mistake, which cost him the entire game, where he took horses to move his Varamir into the rear of my Kevin. And then Tyrion shifts, then Tyrion shoots into his rear and kills Varamir.
Varys is very good.
Varys is very, very good. And yeah, because elephant in the room as well, if we're going to talk about the list that I ran for the entirety of the Invitational and most of the games at the LGT. I don't have Pycelle.
Elephant in the room.
There is an elephant in the room. And he's holding a toy elephant too.
Alright, okay. Yeah, you don't run Pycelle, which I still think is a big mistake.
So, I actually disagree here. Because, yes, Pycelle is amazingly good. Just amazingly good. Stupidly good. Overpoweredly good. The question is, what aspects is he good in? And I think the answer to that is that Pycelle is very, very good at just going, brain dead, put out a condition token again, and again, and again, and again. He was amazing when he put out weakens, and now when he put out vulnerables, he's just goddamn stupid. The reason I don't run him in that list is because in a double crossbow build, my game plan is dependent on the crossbows, like there's no secret about that.
Yeah.
And when I'm banking on the crossbows, the more things I can do to gain more crossbow shots, the better. And yes, you can kind of make the argument of, is it better to have a vulnerable token or a second shot? Is it better to have a vulnerable token 6 times or 3 extra shots? And that's an interesting question to be had there. But what's very big as well is that Varys, and this I've especially found this in my game against Forestbond in round 1 of the Invitational, which, to be perfectly honest, I think was probably my favourite game of all the 10 games that we had over the tournament. So big shout out there. Really, really loved that one. Really fun game. With Peter, you can everyone's running Varys. That's just a fact. With Peter, you can outplay Varys. Because if you really have to take swords to kill something, but you have something that's almost dead, and will just die to some hits, being able to do that without giving your opponents the Varys hits is potentially a game-winning move.
Yeah.
Being able to guarantee healing your own unit 5 by doing Baelish onto bags, and then if your opponent takes bags, then you do your own Varys to heal too, is a disgusting amount of healing. Now, Pycelle is amazing. There's no getting around that. It's just a fact, and I do miss Pycelle in a way. But the things that Pycelle do for the list and the playstyle, while they are good, I think they're good at a very superficial level. Like, it's just, here, have more tokens.
Are we
and
seeing
that's good.
Are we seeing the kind of discussion or power creep kind of problem, where really the discussion is not GCS? Because really, realistically, the game at the moment is you run GCS in most factions, even though I actually don't necessarily think it's the best option for a build.
Yeah.
The simple truth of the matter is GCS is probably still a good choice.
Yeah.
And then you run it with most likely Varys, because Varys is very effective as a lone NCU, third or a second or first NCU pick.
Yeah.
And the counter, what you're saying is the counter to that style is to drop the GCS yourself, run a range unit, and run Baelish.
Yeah.
But that's also because you're running Lannister with Tywin, which is the
100%.
trade-off there.
100%. And that's the thing. Like, Pycelle is going to be the third pick as the NCU every single goddamn time. And if you're not running double crossbows, you can make an argument. But the thing is as well, Lannisters, I personally think more than any other faction, Lannisters really need tactic zone control.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of, if you have the crowns and the bags, Counterplot is insane. Like, I still think Counterplot was nerfed in the previous patch. However, Counterplot, when you have both zones, is absolutely insane.
Yep.
And Peter sets that up for you. You can Peter once per game onto crowns, then stand Peter onto bags and shoot off with swords with your Peter token. And you can't do that without Peter. And that guaranteed counterplot is so big, and subjugation is so big, and wealth is so big, and all the fealty off a Tywin bomb for the extra damage and the healing. You can't do that with anyone else.
Yeah.
Peter opens that up.
But it's interesting because if Peter gets more popular, then Varys drops off in value, into some regard.
Yeah.
Even though he doesn't really drop in value. So I still think Varys will see play, and if Varys still sees play, people aren't going to be running Baelish. So it's like a counter problem because there's not enough points in the lists. It really comes down to because the neutral limit has come down, which is obviously a positive thing. Because the neutral limit has come down, you actually can't fit in everything you. Very good.
No, exactly. Which I think is good for the game, but it also does create a little bit of a discrepancy where I think a lot of factions should be running Golden Company, crossbows, and Varys and Peter, and you can't.
Yeah.
One of those things has to go. Lannisters have a really good shooting unit already, so they don't need Golden Company crossbows. Baratheons have a really good shooting unit in the Lightbringer, so you don't really need the Golden Company crossbows. But Targaryens need them. Starks need them, I think. I'm running out of faction names here, but I mean, I really do think so. Martells, I think, need them.
Yeah, Martells, yeah.
Martells absolutely, 1,000,000% need them. Stop running goddamn Royal Guards and start running Golden Company crossbows. I
don't know, I think Sand Skirmishers are just as good. Or I think Sand Skirmishers are finally... They're as effective, if not more effective, and it's okay to not run the Golden Company crossbows. Because the Sand Skirms are okay, or fine.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not bad. Yeah. They're definitely not bad.
But people want to know. We've talked around the bush a lot, and we have kind of touched on it. But we've moved into it now, which is obviously the competitive building and things like that, which is Boltons. We touched on Lannisters a little bit.
Yeah.
We will go on to Boltons because people want us to talk about Boltons. What the competitive state of the game at the moment is quite open, and I was trying to need Kevin. Yes.
I don't know who's been doing that recently, but I love you for it.
It's probably Mark. I know that he does.
Exactly.
So the state of the competitive game, like, Night's Watch are above and beyond. When I say above and beyond, they're not like they're not like miles better.
They broke the stats page.
They're not like miles better. They just are the best faction. I don't think anyone disagrees there. I think Night's Watch as a generalized thing are just the best faction. They have very obvious synergies. What is something I will keep making this point though is Night's Watch are the best faction. They aren't necessarily the best commanders in the game. They are by definition. If you look at the commander rankings, they will all be higher because the faction is higher. Because the commander ranking is a combination of both. But their commanders aren't necessarily incredibly strong or weak. John is probably the best one, in my opinion. Still, Cotter's decent.
Cotter's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Dennis Mallister's okay. You know, I think Donald's okay. Jaws probably a little bit worse than he was. But the truth of the matter is, it's the faction that carries them, not the commanders.
Yeah. 100%. And you see very much the opposite in something like Lannisters.
Yes. Yeah,
and then you see a very different thing in what they call in Greyjoys, where units are shit, factions shit, commanders are shit, but Balon gives you Balon is a cheat. Yeah. It's literally what's that over there? Oh no, my unit didn't come back to life. No idea what you're talking about. They were always there. You've got
Balon. Ground men are obviously still pulling their weight, and ultimately Silenced Men. And every competitive build of Greyjoy right now is basically revolving around those three things, to some level.
100%.
And the commanders, there's some options, but it doesn't really matter as much. Baratheon are weird because Eldon is still doing really well, and I feel like there's Eldon double pots type stuff might just always be doing really well. That list might just forever do really well.
I can't wait until Cots go to Armor 3, Morale 8, and they're still going to be winning games. I don't get it.
Yeah. So something, whatever. Just whatever with Greyjoy there. I mean, Baratheon there. Whatever. Rightful Heir's doing fine as well. Rightful Heir's proving to do alright in the kind of GCS type stuff there. Neutrals are fine because neutrals get to run all the cool stuff with a deck that's decent. And if people want to play melee-based infantry fights, neutrals are good at that.
Yeah.
Because they have lists that have that. I will say that neutrals will drop off, hopefully, when people start running a higher activation build types again, because neutrals don't have ways of getting to 8 with reliability or good units.
No.
The problem with neutral, if anything, is there's no list depth to neutrals. I really do think that there's about 3 archetypes you can run, and if your list isn't one of 3 lists, you're just talking about a variant of the same list.
Yeah.
It is just a variant.
Yeah.
Or it's something mental.
And the list is 4 units of Golden Company Swordsman, right?
Oh God, no. But that style might not actually be completely trash.
Yeah.
Part of the problem. I have no idea what Targs do. I still to this day cannot tell you what Targs do. I think Targs are supposed to run dragons.
I think so. I think dragons are a somewhat hilarious, kind of reasonable, actually maybe not too bad count against Golden Company Swordsman.
Yeah. And you play a movement game where you can gang up on a unit and kind of gang up on a unit and kill it, and then push your advantage.
Like 2 dragon attacks should kill a unit of Golden Company Swordsman.
Don't know about
that. Is it not D3 plus 3 wounds?
No, it's ranks plus D3.
Okay, so once you take them down to the last rank, it's just
It's 4 to 6, and then the second attack is always going to be on 2 ranks, assuming there's no failed. Let's just ignore failed panic test for a moment. But the second is always going to be 2 plus D3. So you need at least one failed panic test or both failed panic tests to ever kill them in 2.
Mm-hmm.
Reasonably.
Yeah, no, I see that.
And if they don't fail the first and you're 4 on the first, the second attack can never kill them because of Iron Resolve.
Yeah.
Which sucks. But yeah, you need to play that style.
Yeah.
Martell, the problem is Martell have almost got like a set build, which is you run Sand Skirmishers, probably with a Spear Lord, but we'll just say Sand Skirmishers for now.
Yeah.
Probably run a unit of cavalry. It could be Outriders. It could be Knights.
It's Starfall Knights.
But like 6 and 8. Sure.
Yeah.
Something there. And then you've got some points left over for 2 more units.
Yeah.
And that could be a unit of Outriders. Go with your Knights. Or a unit of Knights to go with your Outriders. Oh look, this sounds exactly the same.
Golden Company crossbows.
And potentially Golden Company crossbow, or even like if people want to run the melee block, run the GCS. Like that's okay. Yeah. Or Royal Guard. There is options there. Then some people like dip into like Dune Vipers or whatever rather than the Outriders, or dip into a combination of Dune Vipers and then putting an attachment in the Outriders or the Knights or whatever. But like, there's that kind of archetype going on. I think it really depends on the commander and what you're trying to do. There's an option.
Yeah.
Free folk. I built a lot of free folk lists. And free folk lists are... I personally think that nearly all the commanders in free folk are pretty much the same. And the way you play them and what you're trying to do with them, they're nearly all identical. Except Steer. And Steer does it better than the rest. It's the same game plan, but just does it better. And then you've got Varamir, who does a different game plan. And Mag, who does a different game plan. And
oh, goddamn Mag.
I see a Steer list, I see a Mag list, and I see a Varamir list. And all of the other commanders I just tend to see as worse versions of maybe better in unique situations. No, not for me. Lannisters, it's Kevin, or Kevin. And if you're not running Kevin, you might be running Gregor. And I do think there's probably a place for Gregor, as you said earlier. The ability for Gregor to just run over people is...
and here's what honestly kind of bugs me about it. Like, not seriously, but to a certain degree does bug me a bit. It's this vicious cycle of arriving at the wrong conclusion because of the correct line of thinking.
Yeah.
Approaching a game and saying, I'm going to run Gregor because he's good, I personally think is a mistake. And a lot of people have said, oh, Gregor's got a massive buff in the new patch. Gregor got some buffs. He also got a pretty big nerf, let's be honest. But he did get some buffs.
What was his nerf?
He lost Fury's Charge.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
And that's a bit of a big deal. Obviously, Sundering is great, but you now can't stack Sundering and Fury's Charge anymore.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of don't care because Pycelle exists. Like...
Very true. Again, it's a very minor thing. It's a very minor thing, but generally speaking, Gregor got buffed. However, and you know this, Mickey, I really tried to get Gregor to work last patch. I played a lot of games with Gregor. Yes, Gregor got buffed, but Gregor got buffed in the aspects of Gregor that he was already good. Gregor was already good at smashing face when he gets into combat. You know what Gregor's weaknesses were? The fact that if he rolls a 1 on the charge and has Price of Failure and Overrun in hand, he just cries. And he's a melee infantry commander in a deck and a faction that has 0 support for melee infantry. That's Gregor's problems. And yes, he now hits harder, but setting up a situation where you can get the value out of him without relying. I still think Gregor is just bad. However, 2 automatic wounds and a very aggressive playstyle can have play. And so I personally think that going in, like, if you're brand new to Lannisters, you haven't looked at the meta and you go, I'm going to build 2 lists. I'm going to build one list, which is whatever, should be Kevin, but let's just say whatever for the sake of it. And the other list is going to be Gregor, because Gregor good and Gregor smash. From a fun perspective, I completely agree. I love Gregor smash. Gregor smash is very, very, very fun. But I don't think that's the correct conclusion. However, Gregor does counter certain builds and certain playstyles. In the sense of, I'm going to start running Gregor Red Cloaks again as a potential free throw counter. Because I think that might have play. I'm not sure. That's going to be amazing. But now that Gregor is better, and Sandor always was amazing, and is still amazing, Gregor can destroy Mag pretty easily. Gregor can destroy Varamir. Gregor just looks at a cat. It doesn't matter if it's just Gregor left, he just looks at a cat and it dies. Which is hilarious.
I do hate that.
I find it truly hilarious. But yeah, I'm not going to harp on about it massively, but Gregor, I think, is a good choice. Not because Gregor good, but because Gregor solves certain other list problems. And it's not a big thing or a serious thing, but it kind of bugs me that what I personally consider to be a wrong list decision ends up being the better choice, not because of a power perspective, but because of a meta perspective. Which, in a way, is fresh and interesting, that can actually happen. It's just not personally what I find interesting. But still, objectively, I think an interesting thing.
Jeremy says, what does the build look like? And my best advice to you, Jeremy, is look at what Sophie's got for her lists at the LGT and Invitational, the Gregor list that she runs with the Live Sports City Watch Gregor, the GCS with Sandor, Tyrion Lannister, in guards. Sorry, saying Tyrion and Lannister sense context of what unit he was in. The Tyrion in Guardsmen and Brigands with Pycelle, Tywin, Varys. That, if I was going to advise you on a list build, that would be a good place to certainly start looking. That list is fine. I'd suggested some changes to Sophie, things that I think she could look at and potentially change. I don't know if it makes the list better. Like 6 and 2 3s, I think it comes down to play style. It comes down to what you want to achieve. But I had suggestions on Cajo. Isaac, you'd had suggestions. One of the classic ones we both suggested, right, was is the Land Sports City Watch the right thing? Do you look at something else like Mountain's Men, or you're looking at Red Cloaks as your kind of answer?
Even Halberdiers I find truly hilarious. Yeah. The idea of 7 automatic hits and 2 wounds with Sundering unweakenable on the charge when you charge me is really hilarious.
Carlo, again, something very similar. He drops out the Guardsman. I think he just goes for Halbs because he likes the Halbs over the Guards in every way. And he drops out the Lannisport City Watch to pick up 5-point Cutthroats. So he's got Cutthroats and GCS. And then he drops the Varys, and I think he picks up High Sparrow in his list.
That's a very Carlo pick.
Yeah. So, like, there's options there. The point, and I think he might go runs a turncoat with the extra point he saved. But like the point being is that there's options there for you to invest into, look into, around how you build the list. The list is a 7, and it's, if we're being very honest, it's probably a Tywin NCU list.
Yeah.
So you're looking at one GCS probably with Sandor. You're looking at probably having a Cav, and it's probably Brigands because Brigands get the most synergy from Gregor. So you don't have much left to pick around and think about, really.
You can also replace Brigands with crossbows, which I actually think definitely has play.
Yeah. crossbows are also a fine pick. You could also just run Tyrion crossbows with the brigands as well, saving that point from the Turncloak I mentioned earlier. Run the Tyrion bows, which is again a solid pick. I think that the problem with that unit is it needs a bit more babysitting than other units, like the Halberdiers or Guardsmen. But yeah, something like that, Jeremy, as a Gregor list. There's scope to go with it. Like there isn't a right and wrong way to go about it. It comes down to what exactly are you looking to match it up into. And what I think now is I do think, like, more so than ever, there are units that are worth playing, and there are units that are good into different matchups.
Yeah.
There are not many units in most factions that are that playable. Is the problem when we talk about competitive gaming. Like we mentioned Mountain's Men there. This is probably the only list I'd ever recommend a Mountain's Men. Like I wouldn't even recommend it with Roost Commander. Roost Commander and Mountain's Men is just a bad idea. Like the only list, right? That I'd recommend Mountain's Men. And even then I don't even necessarily think they're the best pick. This is also the only list that Sophie will self-admit ever expect to see City Watch.
Yeah.
Don't play them. Like even Guardsmen, she likes them. I don't. Whatever. Gold Cloaks, don't see no space for them anywhere. Gold Cloaks might be good.
Yeah, I have been thinking about that. I think in a Red Cloak build, if you find yourself in the points position where you can't afford another unit of Red Cloaks, Gold Cloaks are interesting.
We're very touched on this. This is kind of like a little bit about it, and this is just a mock list. Please don't take this as some kind of like god tier list at all. This is going to go for like a max style on our objective here around killing the enemy. Oh, I missed that. And let's finish it off with this. I don't like this list. It does cavalry. I think cavalry are strong. But you could go for something a little bit like that. At 40 exactly? Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You actually probably drop out the Tyrion here and put Tyrion here. And then you might actually drop out the crossbowmen for brigands for the cavalry piece as well. But range unit's good. So this is what your list would look like. So it's gold cloaks with Gregor. Red cloaks with Gregor, red cloaks with Sandor, gold cloaks with Tyrion, crossbowmen, Pycelle, Joffrey, Tywin. We realistically can drop out the Pycelle, and we would look to run Varys, obviously in the alternative slot there. Varys being incredibly good, and we're often going to be wanting to do Joffrey with the assault orders on the opener, rather than Pycelle with the opener. And you also might look at those crossbowmen coming out. You might also consider running Sandal Halbs rather than double red cloaks. Double red cloaks is probably better for you, but like there's an option there. You might also consider dropping out the Tywin, which allows you some points to potentially run one GCS if you really wanted to. We're changing the build a little bit here, but like there's some obviously we're deviating towards away from the red cloak gold cloak combo and more into like a more standard Gregor list we just saw. Something like that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's really interesting because in a red cloak list and in a Gregor list, it's just any lance list you're going to take Tyrion. Because Tyrion for 1 point now is stupid. I think he's absolutely stupid how good he is for a point. That being said, I don't necessarily think that he should be nerfed. I just think that's where 1 point attachments, because how good activations are, I would love to see every 1 point attachment in the game be that good.
We were actually talking about this on Friday, right?
Yeah.
That Sandor is like a perfectly fine 1 point attachment. In that you probably wouldn't run him outside of Gregor lists. But as a vassal piece in a Gregor list, 100% makes sense. Like Sandor is good in a Gregor list.
It's really good.
That's where you want vassal, which is basically what with the way that Gregor's cards work. That's what you want vassal pieces to be. they're not the kind of thing you pick up in a random list. But if you are running Victarion, running Newt makes sense. Like, it's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
It makes your list stronger by running that 1-point attachment because it's good. Tyrion is good enough that he's good in any list. Fair enough. Like the old Asher, the Ashers of the world, where Asher was in every list because why wouldn't you? Tormund for a while, obviously with the Warcry Stalwart. All those kinds of things. It's okay for named characters to be powerful.
Yeah, and they should be. At the end of the day, even though one of my favorite, like, whenever I get into a competitive game, one of my favorite parts of it is at the very beginning, I'm usually very firm on theme. Like, I'm trying to stick to theme. And the longer and the deeper I delve into the game itself, the more I start disconnecting the theme from the miniatures to having it be a game of mechanics. And I don't see Cutthroats as a Bolton unit. I see Cutthroats as automatic rerolls and vulnerable on a squishy unit for 5 points in melee infantry.
Yes.
And even though at the very beginning, I'm always very hesitant to do that, eventually I reach that point, and I love it so much. When you're so deep into the game and the mechanics of it, where every unit and every name is just a block of stats. Because when everything is a block of stats, the world becomes your oyster. It really does. And I get so excited about it because you see all these combos and options and possibilities, and it allows for the really creative builds, like the Six-Act Stock build, to blossom out. Because you go from, looking at Tully Cav as Tully Cav to Lance Cav with passive healing. That can stack with another form of passive healing. That can stack with another form of passive healing. That can then stack with another form of passive healing up top of that. And that's really interesting. That's really, really interesting. I mean, you get to that, and when you get to that point, I just love it. I really, really do.
Which is, we'll get to in a second with Boltons, which we still aren't there after half an hour trying to get on the Boltons.
Oh dear.
Stark's list building is weird. I mean, Starks are dropping off the pack a little bit again. They've not changed massively. They are trending downwards. They're maintaining a 47 to 48% win rate, which is up on 2021. It's up a little bit on season 1. It's a little bit of an improvement on. But it's not like Starks have not. Buff Nice Watch. Starks have not seen an improvement in season 2 to season 3 of any real overall sense. The game is in a better spot. So it's worth mentioning that the game is overall in a better spot. The game, I'd just like to point this out yet again, the game was in a very good spot prior to the patch. There were a few things that needed changing. The game is in a good spot now in terms of faction balances against one another outside of Night's Watch and Boltons. That being said, there are inconsistencies within factions when we talk about meta. One thing I will say is the game is a lot more list chickeny. I said this last week, I think. A lot more list chickeny, a lot more kind of like the intricacies of your build matter compared to the intricacies of somebody else's build. So just bear that in mind as well. Like something dumb, like the inclusion of Tywin at 6-point NCU in a Lannister build changes my opinion of that build and how I play against it, depending on the list I'm playing.
Massively.
Like it actually has an impact. So powerful pieces have impact. So you can't just say, how do you beat this build? Because it's like, cool, what's the intricacies of that build? What's the game mode? What are the intricacies of your build that you're playing? Because actually, if I see everything holistically, I can then start marrying up resources, seeing where things go. And that's where you can turn around to someone and say, I don't like your odds, or actually, I think this particular thing that you're running as tech is going to work against this, and this is how you would do this.
And just what you said there as well about the intricacies of the build itself. I had, for the first time ever, I had a almost complete mirror in Lannisters. Actually, no, that's a lie. Not the first time ever, but the first time for the 7-act double crossbow build. I had one Kevin 8 complete mirror, which was a really fascinating game. But today I was playing against Wep, obviously one of the best Lannister players in the world, very, very solid player. And our lists were almost completely identical. So I was running my Kevin double crossbows, he was running his Kevin double crossbows. The only difference was he did not have Peter, he had Pycelle, and instead of a turncoat, he had upgraded Kevin to Golden Company crossbows. Those seem like tiny changes, but they completely change how the list plays. Now, the general game plan is the same in terms of how the list operates, but when you actually take a step back and you look at, because the proactive level of the list, in terms of how it wins the games, is the same, but it's reactive, how do I F with you along the way, is completely different. Because Sentinel is a very, very, very good ability. Turncoat, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, is the best 1-point attachment in the game. To be honest, I do think so. Or it's definitely one of the best, but in my opinion, it honestly is the best. And those two differences, in terms of how they interact on the table, are really fascinating.
Yeah. That's fair. The turncoat very underrated. I think turncoats are good. I do think turncoats are good.
Yeah.
I disagree that they're as strong as people say.
How come?
Because the one wound is important. The token is fine. But most of the time, into Lannisters right now, there are vulnerable tokens and tokens you're putting out, so you're probably looking at a panic token most of the time, or you really need the vulnerable for the charge on the knights, because you haven't put it out in another way. What you're actually interested with the cutthroat is you're interested in the cutthroat because it says no tactics cards and no orders.
Yeah.
And the no abilities or orders is only good if the opponent has, or not even no abilities, right? It's just orders.
Just orders, yeah.
So that's only good when your opponent is running something with an order that it requires to get value out of on that turn. So into the kind of discussion around GCS, turncoats are very good because you can switch off 1 armor and 2 morale, which if you actually think of it as not, GCS are very turncoats are very good. The reason you're getting the value out of the turncoat there is because you are doing a wound, setting them to 11, not 12, which is a lot easier to kill an 11 wound unit. But more importantly, you're also giving yourself Sundering and Vicious.
Yeah.
And giving yourself Sundering and Vicious for free, but stacks with other sources of Sundering and Vicious against GCS is good.
Yeah.
And one says this guy combines it with Tywin Bomb, which is disgusting, but that's it, isn't it? That's actually the point, is that the turncoat isn't very good. Tywin is the one doing a lot of the work. It's just the turncoat allows the Tywin Bomb to be so much more effective.
Yeah.
Ironically, of course, if you run Roose Commander, you can delay the Tywin. So he pops the turncoat, pops the Tywin, delay the Tywin. Turncoat now does very little.
Yeah, absolutely. The turncoat, it's not impossible to play around the turncoat. It's, I think, a fair fact to say that basically no one does, but it is possible to do it. What I like about the turncoat is it's also just silly in certain game modes. Like, what I find absolutely hilarious is the fact that, I believe at least, it counts for your point on the board in the enemy quarter on Here We Stand, which is absolutely hilarious. Like, fundamentally hilarious.
It is a bit funny, not gonna lie.
Now, obviously that's not the reason you take it, but in my experience, I put out the vulnerable token almost every single time. Now, to be fair, that's in the context of a list that doesn't have Pycelle. In a Pycelle list, you probably don't do it as often. However, it's like I said, it's the way that it stacks with a Tywin bomb, and it's going from 2 wounds before your lance charge to 4 to 5 wounds before your lance cap charge is a massive, massive, massive difference. And like we said, once you've taken 4 to 5 wounds, you don't even need the lance cap charge. If you've got a vulnerable and a panic token, you're in short range of crossbows, and I've done Tyrion to draw Hemi Rorks, I can guarantee that whenever I want, I can finish off with some crossbows without even blinking.
Yeah.
Like, it's really not difficult. Whereas if it's just the Tyrant Bomb that's not reliable, you cannot do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if your opponent survives on a few wounds and then just run off back and then just heal up and then make their mark later in the game, you've now wasted the entirety of a Tywin Bomb. And that's the interesting thing with the Tywin Bomb, which is if you don't play it properly, you're not going to get the value out of it.
But it's also when people talk about, we spoke about it earlier in terms of how do you counter like the Stark style build, which people don't know is like it's dubious whether or not it's a build that's worth running, but it's a double Tully Cavalier with Mage Mormont in GTS, running 3 NCUs, so it's a 6 activation list. You can run a variant with three Cavaliers and 1 GTS, and then run 2 NCUs. These things all exist. It's dubious if any of them are particularly good, because they're all kind of like much of a muchness, and they can present a problem if you just ram it down people's throats. But yeah, like the Tywin Bomb they Tywin Bomb you and they just run off, and it's like, oh well, that was bad. But yeah, like you're throwing the kitchen sink. What people perhaps don't realize is the kitchen sink is being thrown at a unit when this is happening. Like a 6-point NCU with a once per game ability, which is not. Would you take a 4-point NCU that's blank? Maybe you would, but you can kind of attribute roughly 3 points of value to Tywin Bomb.
Yeah. And
that's not really how that works, because 6-point NCUs have to be worth quite a lot more than a 4 to be worth taking.
Yeah.
So, not really true. But you can kind of equate it, call it a 6-point worth of investment, if you will. The turncoat for another point, because that is now used, it's gone, and that is exactly what it's for. And then also an 8-point cav charge, which only gets 6 of in a game. Let's disclude round 1. So a cav activation. So 1/5 of the cost, overall cost, an impact of Knights of Castle Rock. So you are, and that's not including any cards and stuff. You are throwing 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you include the full Castle Rock, 15 points, right?
Yeah.
15 points of resources are going into this one object on the field. You're a 7-point unit. Are you genuinely telling me that you'd expect to survive 15, 16, 17 points of value being spent to try and kill you?
Yeah.
Like you actually shouldn't. You shouldn't expect that to be favourable to you as a player.
No.
And if it is favourable for you, and you have a way that you can then counter it and potentially do something, you're actually in a really good spot. You don't realise it because you've got a unit that's nearly dead, that's quite an expensive unit. But actually, you've got a really expensive unit that's not dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Take that as something just to consider. Anyway.
100%.
Starks do their thing. I don't know. Starks are weird for me. I enjoy playing Starks. I enjoy doing fun things with Starks. Mostly shooting people and trapping people. Or playing lots of Cav and like ramming Cav down people's faces, but not necessarily Tully Cav. Just mixing it up, playing a mix and match. Bit of Zorse, bit of Outrider. I enjoy playing some of the weirder builds of Stark that people don't like. Not a big fan of. Personally, don't like Mage Mormont that much. Not a big fan of that. Did that once before. Proved it with Shaggy Dog, and was like, yeah, cool, this is fun, but like, it's got obvious flaws. Then I played against it and went, cool, yeah, this has got obvious flaws, and killed it. Then people have run it some more, and I'm just like, cool, right, you have some obvious flaws, and this is what's going to happen if you play. And then I've seen people do well with it, and I'm like, cool. And Great John Umber, who I do think is good, I just don't personally enjoy playing that style. As play is doing okay. Dark's Rob got a buff, he's doing okay. I still think Eddard is your best choice. I don't really know what to say anymore. I just think there's a lot of people playing things with Starks, and there is a lot of, if anything, there's a lot of Stark list building and play going on. And actually, the biggest prevailing fact I can come away with is I don't believe there are any cut and dried Stark metalists.
Yeah.
Great John Umber with Tully Cavalier in Cutthroats with a mixture of some other stuff spattered in is probably the closest you get.
Yeah.
And then some people were running these kind of weird Tully Cavalier Mormon block lists, and I just don't care.
What kind of weird player would do that?
Yeah, bad ones. No.
Probably just someone who can't play Starks.
People who can't play Starks, that's right. No, but people do it with like the double Tully Cavalier, and they do it aggressively and run it with like Great John or whatever. There are things there, but like I just don't. Yeah. I don't personally subscribe to them because I feel like I've seen them before, and so because I've played against them a lot or seen them played a lot, I'm kind of like I just know how to counter this, but it's not something I can really explain. I'm just gonna counter it because I'm gonna do whatever my opponent gives me to do, and they will give me things to do because they don't have a choice.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
And
100%.
Make them give me. Boltons then. Boltons are at -64 and are still in relative freefall.
Oh god.
-9 in the last 50. They are not. They are by far. I think if we were to go through all of the factions, let's just quickly see. Night's Watch are mostly unchanged. Yeah, 1.7 change in the last 50. Greyjoys been on a bit of a rise, but 1.1 change. Baratheon 6. So the Baratheon have had a good week, right? Yeah. Baratheon have had a good week. Neutrals 9. Oh no, 6. Good week for neutrals, or good last 50. I should say. Last 50 for Targ, bit of an improvement, 5. Martell, bit of a drop, 5 drop. Again, they're all within the realms of the middle section of the kind of game board. Free Folk dropping by +5 as well. Lannisters have got a drop, I believe. Lannister drop, -3. And Stark's going to be on about a minus something drop, right? Yeah, -1.8. There's a few gainers, few good gainers, but Boltons are just, they're already the lowest rated faction in the game. By like 50 points. And then they've lost 9 points on top of that.
And just like it's difficult to keep on losing that much ELO when you're that low. Like that's the thing. That's the really impressive thing. Just like it's really difficult for Mikkel to gain more ELO when he plays games. It's really difficult for Boltons to lose ELO. And they still manage to do it.
It's just rubbish.
Yeah. Okay, so should we talk about why they're rubbish?
Percentages are all wrong.
Yeah. So why are Boltons rubbish? I feel like we've harped on enough, like the two old men in the Muppets about how shit melee infantry is. And Boltons on paper, when you look at them as an idea, should be really
The best build has a 35% win rate.
I can't.
They average 33% win rate.
The timing was just incredible.
If it was 43, we'd be sat here saying Boltons aren't very good.
Yeah.
For context, for people who don't know how bad 33% is, and I know the sample is still relatively low. Trust me, if it gets bigger, it doesn't help. Targ in Season 1 had a 50% win rate. Close to it. I mean, who's a traditionally absolutely terrible faction?
Neutrals last patch.
Yeah, neutral. Let's look at neutrals in the last patch. 38% win rate. 39 if you round up the percentage.
That's 15 percentage points more than Boltons.
Well, 5, 6, because 33.
Oh, 33, yeah. I can't do
rounding
math.
up to?
I can't do math.
Still 5 percentage
I'm as
points
illiterate
higher.
as a Baratheon Halberdier.
Okay. 5% total win rate difference. Now, you can't just analyze win rate. Win rate alone is not enough. Yeah, that's why we have ELO.
No.
There's loads of discussion points here. But, like,
Yeah.
this should be telling you that we see Boltons at minus 64.5. Oh, they have actually just recorded a win
Against themselves.
today against themselves.
Can I just ask how that even works? Is the top 2 games the same game, or?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
You'll notice if you look, as I'll show you a really good example of this. So we see here at game 48, they were at minus 64.517. That would have been here, the Steel Shank Bolton versus Varamir after that loss.
Mm-hmm.
Then they recorded another loss and went down to minus 66.471. But that same loss was also a win. So it goes back up to 64.517. Because the graph dictates it's 2 games played.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll notice that the ELO change was actually 0.
Yeah.
What you saw and what you're seeing is the ELO between Steelshanks, Walton, and Roos is changing. Which does
fair
matter,
enough.
because you do have to record it that way.
Yeah.
So Bolton's Steelshanks would have gone up. No, Steelshanks drops, sorry, and Roos's comes up.
Yeah.
But the ELO for the faction, of course, is unchanged because it's a mirror. So you can actually tell. I don't know exactly how you do it because I don't know what the percentage rate. But it was about call it a 0.2 change. Sorry, a 2-point change.
Yeah.
And you don't get the same graphs. So I'm not even gonna look. I don't think. If I can just type in Bolton, and no, that will take me to the bottom of whatever list. Oh, you do get the last. Yeah, so Steelshanks dropped there by about 2. Less than 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But for reference, like, this is how bad it is. Like, you add them up, and you combine them to get this rating.
Yeah.
The way that the ratings work. Steelshanks Bolton, Ramsay Snow, and Roose Bolton have all gotten. They're all worse than Bolton's.
Yeah.
Like, in the grand scheme of things, none of them are doing well.
No. No.
Like, it's embarrassing how bad they are. Roose has nearly capped out the game. He's on a plus 3.7 at the moment, but he's nearly capped out the rankings. I say capped out, but like he's nearly hit the dreaded minus 100.
Which is really funny, because I honestly think that Roose is the best Bolton commander.
I would tend to agree. For reference, wasn't Tywin one of the worst commanders in the last patch?
I can't remember, to be honest. Yeah, no, so... I can't really remember Tywin being on the bottom. I remember Jaime was on the bottom, Gregor was close. Yeah, Jaime was the worst Lannister commander. Still is, by the way. Still is the worst.
Actually speaking, second best.
Oh, come on.
He's on a bit of a meteoric rise.
I just had a brain aneurysm.
He's had a good little run over the last week.
What?
Yeah, I mean, a good run over the last week. Like, recorded a bunch of wins back to back. That's basically it. Anyway, I mean, Jaime's not done well. 40% win rate back in season 2 was trash. Tywin had a 38. He's at 38 mean, Tywin got buffed and he's a lower win rate than he was in the last patch, which I know is like
Yep.
tantamount to the way that balance works. Is that you don't just change one thing, you change the ecosystem.
Yeah. But I mean, the main reason is also because Tywin didn't see you as seeing more play, right?
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and those stats are tied together.
Yeah.
Those stats are tied together.
Like in comparison, like Gregor went from like a 41% win rate to up to 54 currently in season 3. I just don't know. I Boltons, go on. I mean, this is depressing. 33% overall win rate, and it's not getting better.
Yeah. No, they're in free fall, and there's no sign of that's going to stop. So I guess let's have a look at why we think this might be, and I think the answer is not too difficult. To continue what I was saying before I lost a kidney to laughter to see the graph being quite possibly the worst graph I've ever seen in my entire life for a power ranking. But anyway, on paper, you would think that they're not terrible because they have one of the best. Well, Blade Men used to be the threat. Just the threat. They used to be the thing that you saw everywhere in every single list. And the change was only a single attack die change. Which, while it, as we'll see, it is a big change, but it's not as big of a change as, say, Gregor's nerf back in the day, which is he lost an inch of movement on a cavalry. Like, that's far, 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 far bigger. On top of that, you also have cutthroats. And cutthroats are, quite possibly, the best melee infantry unit for 5 points that has an offensive role in the game.
Yeah.
On top of that, you have Dreadfoot Archers, who are not bad at all. They're not amazing, but in the grand scheme of 6-point archery units in the game, I think they're solidly third place. They're behind Lancer Crossbows, they're behind Lightbringers, but I think they're above everything else.
I think for me, they sit very much on a par where Stark Bowmen are, probably.
Yeah, maybe.
They are basically exactly the same attack profile.
Yeah.
The difference is the Stark Bowmen probably just win the trade now because of that. If you roll a 1 on the defense, become weakened, and the base morale over the 7 of the Dreadthought.
Yeah, I mean, Sour Allen does change that math.
Yes.
Because he's free, and you should be putting Sour Allen into all Dreadfoot Archers, I think, every single time. And that does make them a lot better. They still die like punks to Lightbringers. Like, it's not even funny. It's not even funny. It's not funny at all. And it is a bit. But even Lannister crossbows just kind of scratch their heads because their Sundering doesn't actually do anything. So yeah, big sadness. But so you have, and also you have Flaven has no secrets passive in the deck.
Yeah,
you don't have to use a command for it. You just have it in the base deck, which is not bad. So you have good cavalry unit, good melee infantry unit, good shooting unit. You have a good card in the deck. However, two things. One, Flaven has secrets is significantly and massively worse than it used to be. And I mean by leaps and bounds. Not unplayably bad, but it's basically now a slightly better version of Counterplot as opposed to a game-winning card.
Yeah.
It used to be you run this card in your deck, and you have a game-winning thing that can shut down your opponent's 6-point, 7-point, maybe even 8-point investment. You shut down their Tycho, you shut down their Tywin, you shut down their Corrin, you shut down anything that you want. You shut down half of their supply aid, which is disgusting as well. You shut down half of their Melisandre bomb. All that is now gone. On top of that, you have the fact that the rest of the deck is what you would get if you were to take Mickey's very worst nightmare. You then combine it with the collective puke of the top 10 ELO players, after seeing a deck like this, you mix those nightmares and the puke into a little bowl, you then bake a cake in an oven that then explodes, whilst being in a radioactive nuclear war zone. The result you have in front of you is called the Bolton deck. It's just so bad. Now, why is it?
West Coast Spannum says, I got it. There's not enough confusing rules to take advantage of with Boltons. No, there isn't. Actually, I'm going to be very straight up and simple with you. Flame and Has No Secrets was made worse.
Yeah.
But was a commander card. They Keeps a Man Alive was a commander card. Cruel Methods was a commander card. But the Cruel Methods they have is made worse because it only heals infantry units for some weird reason. Like, I get why Weepers does a little bit, because healing giants with Cruel Methods in Weeper might be a bit too strong.
Yeah.
But actually, who cares? You know what? Like, who actually cares? Why not just let them have it? Cruel Methods in Boltons, why don't you just let it heal the cavalry? What a dumb thing. Sadistic Games was not a particularly good card in Ramsey. Yeah, our Blades of Sharp is, like, fine, but it's certainly not an amazing card.
It's one of the worst. Like, it's if you take a star card, which generally speaking are bad, you just take the worst one, then you take away one of half the abilities on it, and then you have Blades of Sharp.
Like, just, yeah.
it's
like fine, but it's not great.
No.
Harsh Punishments is, I actually think, a playable card. It's difficult, but giving Blade Men Sundering is actually a viable thing, as is giving your Bottom Bastard Girls Sundering.
Yeah. The thing with that card is, it is playable, but it's because you need it.
Yes. You
have zero other access to Sundering outside of Saurel in the list.
Yeah.
And your Flame Men are going to do F all if your opponent doesn't let you do it, and that's something really, really helps. And also, the Sundering with the max dice ranks, with then Blades of Sharp for potentially rerolls, with Fueled by Slaughter from Ramsey, with then healing from the Fate Keeps Man Alive. Like, there is play there. There is play there, but I don't know. Like, I don't know how they can, in good conscience, have the Night's Watch cards be what they are, and then create this little piece of shit where you get two good abilities, but a gargantuan, not disability, but balancing, or whatever you want to say. Like, this card is worse than any of the Night's Watch attached cards, just by and large of itself.
And ironically, it's a decent card because you feel like you have to have it.
Yeah.
And the scary thing is, like, this is decent. Like, this is decent on Cutthroats as well. Like, this is good on a lot of things in the Boltons, because you don't have ways of disguising with it otherwise, or having access to these things, and it's really not that good, because you also got an army that's got morale 7 across nearly all of your 6 and 7s across nearly all your units. You're not even like a morale 5 army. So that panic token,
morale 7 on 50% of your units.
Yeah. You have no auto pass panics. There's no worth the reward here, worth the risk, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And Remorse as examples is fine. Like, this is like,
if it comes off, it's hilarious. If you get a panic token out of it, you're happy.
Yeah. If you get the terrain piece, it's great. It is great.
Yeah. It is really cool. It's really funny.
But, like, they haven't got a quest card, which is good because quest cards suck.
I mean, but not in Bolton, where everything is just going to die like paper anyway. Like, if you had a crazy, like, seriously, make it a crazy quest card. Make it, you attach it to a unit. When someone dies, they get automatic. Let's go absolutely crazy here. They get automatic Sundering, and when you control the swords, each enemy engaged with you automatically fails every panic test. That would be interesting. It's crazy, but I promise you could put that card in Boltons, they would not see the light of day. They would not break above 0 yellow. I promise you can put that card in and they are not going to go above 0 yellow.
it's just depressing. Like,
Yeah.
the thing is that this is actually the big thing. Overall, this deck isn't actually trash. Ironically, like each individual component is like fine, but overall it just adds up to a selection of cards that don't do a huge amount.
No. But what's even worse is that, yes, they don't do a big amount, but also you can't play, and especially if we take a look at the commander cards as well. They don't, like, we've been speaking basically now for 2 hours now about how shit melee infantry is, and why shooting and cavalry is very good. Should we count how many cards in the deck don't work for cavalry or shooting?
Opportunist does.
Yeah. But Skin Collection does not. Skin Collection on Fladerman would be amazing. But you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that.
Spoilers in the flesh, obviously. Opportunist, there's a card. What else works? Whispered Threats. Yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah. Seeing the flaws, whatever, but Roos is never going to be. I don't think you're ever going to put Roos in a unit where he's ever going to care about it too much.
You can put him in Bolton Bastard Girls, I guess, but like.
You can, but I still think Roos Blackguard is probably the best thing you can do, personally. And then Dreadfort Secrets is actually not a bad card, except for the fact that
Infantry only.
It has to be infantry only. Like, again, that on Flademan would be really amazing.
Price of Fear.
Steel Shanks I find interesting.
Price of Fear is a good card.
Yeah.
It's just so unreliable. Ironically.
It's crazily unreliable. Of all of the performer-free maneuver cards in the game, it's by far the worst.
Yeah.
Which I don't see how they could have done something like that. Again, just make an auto-fail panic. Just make an auto-fail panic. There's none of that in the game. It's a shit faction anyway. You have no access to neutrals, no access to Betas, no access to Varys, no access to Tycho, no access to Golden Company crossbows.
Yeah.
Just give them some auto-fail panics. Panic is the only thing Boltons are supposed to do. Stop giving them worse tricks to do panic compared to Lannisters and Baratheons.
I also hate Steel Shank Bolt. Iron Resolve with Shared Fear. I like the ability. I actually really think Shared Fear as an ability is a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
But, like, I don't really get the synergy of, like, I'm not going to fail panic checks, and if I do, it's not too bad on this unit. But if I do fail the panic tests, I get a payout. Like, well, did you just not want to fail the panic test?
Well, for me, to be honest, I actually do really like that, because it gives you, like, you have dog shit morale in Boltons. Like, sure, you can put him in Bastard Girls, and that's fine, but you're probably more likely putting him in something like Cutthroats, which takes you to a 6 of morale, and 6 of morales you fail. You will absolutely fail 6 of morales. The Iron Resolve is going to help that, means that you take less damage from it, but you are going to fail it every now and again, and dishing out those panic tokens really is nice.
Sure. So what you're saying is that you're going to shoot into Steel Shank Walton's melee, are you? Because you're going to make more panic tests.
Not necessarily,
No,
but your opponent
in which case your Cutthroats are just dead. Because you just got hit by
fair.
2 things, and now you're dead.
Yeah, fair. This is an accurate point.
Because if you get shot, guess what? You die, and you're not at short range most likely. So you fail your panic test, and you go, shit, this ability did nothing. Then you charge in, and that's fine. That's all good. Then you're in melee, and the opponent kills you. When you might fail a panic test, and you go, cool, at least I get to put panic tokens out. And I go, yeah, but you're dead. I don't care. I've just killed your unit. Like, don't get me wrong, I get why Shared Fear might be good, and I get that there's a payout, and it wants to synergize with shooting into melee combat, so you can get the re-rolls and things like that, and then you take the panic test back, and it's less bad because you take the main -1 wound, and you're failing, taking 0 wounds on a failed panic, but then getting the tokens out and things like that. I'm just like, sure, but you need things to go well for this to happen. Like, this is the problem. You need things to go well for this to happen. And if you
Yeah,
roll that
yeah.
failed panic test, and you roll a 3 and not a 1, and you take 2 damage, combined with the fact that you also took an automatic damage from being shot into,
Yeah.
and you didn't kill a rank with... Potentially, you didn't even kill a rank with your archers, so your archers are now taking 2 damage. You're just hemorrhaging wounds everywhere all the time.
And then also, because your opponent has Varys and you have no way to use Baelish to get around it,
Sure.
they just dealt another 3 wounds to you because of Varys.
Yeah.
Like, truly, playing Boltons really does feel like, finding some really obscure contact, spending months meeting him in private, playing this super special thing to get you to the most luxurious, incredible restaurant ever. And you do all this preparation, you do all the pre-planning, you do everything. You finally go there. And you jump through all these hoops, and it's fucking McDonald's. That's just what Boltons feels like. I've played quite a few Boltons games, and that's exactly what it feels like. I'm playing these 5 cards in a row, all which do different things. And I deal 2 more damage as a result.
Yeah, you didn't even protect yourself. You're
No, exactly.
You did 2 more damage after 5 card plays.
Yeah.
Bolton's biggest weakness isn't having faction-wide +2 morale bonus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which they have in Jane Poole.
Yeah. Who by the way, I do think is the best NCU in Bolton.
I personally think Tybalt is, personally.
Yeah.
But
I've heard that, and I think Tybalt is clear second best. For me, I guess, because I go have a good look a little bit at lists, I've had particular, I say success, but it's Boltons. My favourite Bolton build, which to be honest I do think is probably the best, is you take Roost Commander. You put Roost Commander in Blackguard. You've probably got it built there already, to be honest.
Look at this. Bruce Blackguard.
Roost Blackguard, yep.
Ben Bones Bastard Girls.
Yep, that's correct.
Tower Allen Dreadful Archers.
Yeah, that's correct.
A unit of flayed men.
Yeah, that's correct.
Jane Poole.
Yeah, that's correct.
Tybalt.
Yeah, that's correct.
And I run Walder Frey and you run Ramsey, I'm guessing?
I run Ramsey, yeah.
Look at
Hey, 4 points difference.
Look at our literally really imaginative list building.
Yeah. I really think that's the best you can do, because you have a good shooting unit, you have a good anvil, you can make actually pretty crazily anvilish with Jane Poole influence.
Oh yeah.
3+4+ is no joke.
Yeah, the Blackguard and 3+4+ is like GCS levels of defense.
Yeah. Exactly. You have a really decent hybrid unit, which, sure, it's a melee unit, but it can also shoot really, really, really well. And it gets to move 2 before the charge, and it gets to reroll on the charge, which makes it one of the best melee units in the game.
And the vulnerable token is not to be shouted at in a faction that can't put them out in any other ways except Tybalt.
100%. And you actually can use Roos's actually quite good card that's only for melee infantry. And you can also use the other bolting cards for melee infantry, such as healing. It is very easy to with Ram, and it's the reason I really like Ramsey as well. It's just Fueled by Storage is so good as an ability, and being able to put that on the Bastards, they let's say they're almost dead. They're almost dead.
Not even gonna lie, the only reason I won Walder Frey is, of all things, I quite like her taking crowns and weak enemy units that I'm trying to win a trade off at range.
Yeah.
To then do a panic test on whatever's engaged with Ramsey or Roos.
Yeah.
Like the weaken token on Walder is the reason I take her. I don't think I've ever used the Letters ability to search for a Commander Tactics card. Ever.
No.
And if I was, it would only be with Steelshanks Walton, I'm pretty sure, for Auto 6.
Yeah.
That would be literally it.
Which is exactly the thing that I thought as well. The second Boltons came out. There's nothing interesting you can do with them. That's the frustrating thing. Everything that we are talking about here, just everyone just kind of thought of already. And that wouldn't be a problem if they actually were kind of somewhat powerful. The thing is, I'm never going to take Boltons. I love this Bolton faction. From a thematic perspective, I think it's really, really interesting. Now, thematically, I really despise Boltons, which is why I'm doing my conversion, which we might touch on. But
I'm going to throw out there, I actually do enjoy the concept of wanting to play Boltons. Like, I think of Boltons, I think this is going to be fun to play.
Yeah,
Even if it is like
100%.
jumping through hoops and it is like this, that, and the other. I do think there is a reward level of Boltons, of like, when it works, it's fun.
100%. If your opponent passes every panic test, you're just going to lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, I've had a few games with Boltons against Stanniside Baratheon. It is not a fun experience at all.
What's scary, and Stephen says it here as well, Stefan. I made this list for Boltons when Boltons were added to the website and the website was updated. If you actually go back across all my saved lists on stats, you'll notice I've got my free folk list I originally had, my Ramsay and Roose that I made in neutrals. I was playing neutrals a little bit then, and the next list I've made are Bolton, and it's the Bolton Roose. It's the 5th list I made on stats. I typically don't delete lists, because I typically know what most of these are. It's the 5th list I built on stats, and you've just come to me and said basically it's exactly the same list except you have which is mental. There is no creativity in the list builds, and because there's no creativity, it means that the play patterns and everything else are the same. There is no ingenuity, in my opinion, with Bolton, and because there's no difference and no ingenuity, people I already know how to beat this list.
Yeah. It's really not difficult.
No.
It's really not difficult.
And you say there, you're playing against something like a Baratheon, like a Stannis-side Baratheon list, you've got nothing going for you.
No. Your opponent has a Melisandre and you just cry. Now, ironically, I was still able to pull out both those games, but it's...
Lightbringers. Lightbringers just shoot your Dreadfort Archers. You lose that trade with 100% certainty. 3 panic tests onto Roose's panic through the armor, which is not good. Or 3 panic onto the Flayed Men. Flayed Men will probably lose to whatever it is that they face, probably Champions of the Dag, at a similar points value. Blackguard, yes, the Horrific Visage is nice, but if you've got a Stannis Rightful Heir with GCS and Tack Approach, I'm just going to butcher you. Just genuinely, you're dead. And I'm not going to take that much damage for the panic test either, because everything's fine. So really, it turns into a bit of a butchering kind of melee combat type thing going on. And then the Bastard Girls have got like a favourable matchup into like a unit of Wardens as a support piece or whatever. That's a favourable-ish matchup, at least.
Yeah, because it's 5 points versus 7.
Yeah. But it's not.
No.
It's not exactly hard.
And if your opponent runs Melisandre, like... I forget even what the card's called because it's so bad, but the Gain Sundering and Take More Wounds on the Failed Panic. Yeah. You need that card to have any chance against Baratheon because you need to cut through their armor. The second your opponent then brings Melisandre to the table, and you realise that you are taking +3 wounds on your Flayed Men every time Melisandre zaps you. Yeah. It's... Put Axel in the list as well instead. Netting +4 wounds.
Foam laser guns.
Yep.
Let's not. It has no... The thing is, this list is fine, and I actually think this list is not a problem. I don't think this list is bad. This is actually the issue. It's just it doesn't have any overly massively redeeming... Like, this is what you were already doing in neutrals. And the cool thing with neutrals is you've got a commander with good commander cards. Because the commander cards on these lists are not particularly good. You get commander cards that are okay with your commander of choice.
The Roose ones are good, I think.
Yeah, they're okay. I mean, the problem is, like, Whispered Threats is what he has anyway.
Yeah.
Dreadfort Secrets is... Meh.
Seeing the Flaws is a good card.
Sure, but you can't leverage it fully. Ironically, in Roose.
Yeah, 100%.
And for me, the neutral deck is a good deck. Like, it is a genuinely very good deck. It has card recursion, so you can play the good cards more, including your best commander cards, which, by the way, your commanders have the best commander cards and better versions of. Weird. And you have a search card deck. You have a card that says go and get a commander card from the deck. You're more likely to draw those better cards anyway. You also then can utilize Roost better because you have issue commands. Issue commands allows Roost Blackguard in neutrals to do better than Roost Blackguard in Boltons. For me.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here saying I'm just smashing Boltons because they're like not good and trying to put a damper on people who want to play Boltons. By all means, want to play Boltons. I do think it's fun. When it works, it is rewarding. Some people would say like it really is. The Timmies of the world or whatever love this, and that's fine and it's okay. I cannot see, as it stands, competitive Boltons winning games. You're never going to win a competitive event with Boltons in their current state.
No.
And if you are,
you're absolutely not.
You're miles better than all of your opponents, or you've gotten extremely lucky across like 6 or 7 games.
Here's one redeeming quality I will put towards Boltons, just to be a little bit devil's advocate here. The Unga Bunga part of your brain, like the full-on Timmy, let's run forward and have fun. Boltons are actually one of the best factions for that, because regardless whether you roll a 1 for the charge or not, you're probably still going to hit just as shit. And also, a lot of your abilities and the combos and tricks that you want to do don't really rely on you not rolling a 1 on the charge.
You just want a big
so you're
fight.
Probably going... Say again?
You just want a big fight.
Yeah, and I honestly think, maybe a little bit controversially, but I think if you want to play an aggressive, fun, smash face build, Boltons might be better at it than Gregor. I'm not saying Gregor's worse than Boltons. However, Gregor is much more reliant on not rolling those 1s than Boltons are.
No. If you want to play Unga Bunga style, like, the truth of the matter is that abilities like Horrific Visage get used more because people are in melee combat. So Horrific Visage, Intimidating Presence, Spread Fear is a lovely package of 3 things because your opponent is smashing on you with melee attacks all game.
Yeah.
That's why Unga Bunga is better with this list. Is because it's a defensive thing that does something. You're playing into the defensive tech, the tech that exists. If you don't play into the defensive tech of this kind of list, the list does nothing extra.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if Blackguard are sat on a point at the side of the board, not in melee combat. Imagine Blackguard have to push a unit of Raiders off the middle point. Or a unit of Wardens. Or, like, anything.
Oh, God. Yeah.
You're just cool. Right, well, I'm not going to attack you. I'm just going to retreat an inch. Thanks, bro.
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Anyway. It is what it is. Boltons are...
I mean, here's the thing, though, because I'm not necessarily the kind of person who's going to go out of my way to always try and say, oh, well, just play whatever you want for fun. I think you should do that.
Yeah,
but I know there are people who will go out of their way to say that at every point and turn, regardless of how shit something is. I'm just going to say, Bolton's absolute dog shit. If you want to play them, go for it, but they are absolute dog shit and be aware of that. However, I've honestly had a lot of fun with Boltons. I really have. Now, would I ever take them to a GT? No. If I'm going up against an 1800 plus player on stats for a pickup game on TTS, am I going to run Boltons? Probably not. But as a fun game, like, there's a lot of tricks. Like we said about playing the 5 cards for not massive benefit. When we say not massive benefit, it's more in comparison to what other factions would have been able to do for 5 cards. Any other faction playing 5 cards on an attack and stacking all those things would be deleting things. Boltons just don't. However, Boltons by themselves are quite garbage. And so being able to figure out ways to make them significantly less garbage doesn't sound very special, but it's actually been really, really, really fun. And just like you said, Mickey, it really is quite rewarding when you take a faction that's that bad and you just mince through things. And you're not going to do that at a high competitive level, but you can do it.
You can do it. You don't do it most of the time.
No.
Can. And I think that's really where for me, that's where Boltons are. Is that Boltons can do stuff, Boltons can be fun. You just cannot expect them to perform consistently, especially at high level, especially into good builds. They can do fine in a one-off game. You can have fun with them, but just don't expect good results out of them with any level of massive consistency, which is evidently clear in a 33% win action. Like, there's just not a consistent level of performance.
Yeah.
And with that, one last thing to touch on, just quickly. The GT Andalusia was run over the weekend. Was a 6-round event, 35 players, and it was won by Markabel with his Targaryens. Ran a Drogo Marsland, very similar to what we saw from Gorshed in the US. Drogo Screamers, Naked Golden Company Swordsman, Drogo Rhaegal, Danny Unburnt, Varys, and he run Barristan. Gorshed run Cajo. And then a Marsland list of GCS, Freemen, Brazen Beast, Stormcrow, Mercs, Screamers, Missandei, Barristan, Varys. Noticing no range units in his lists. He won the event. So congratulations to Mark and Markabel for pulling that 35-man out of the bag with Targs. I do think, like, again, we see 2 Stark lists there with no range units at all. See if this Greyjoy was one, came 5th, so come the highest in the Swiss afterwards. He ran a GCC with Bronn, so that's refreshing. And then no range unit. Second list, you see a theme here. There are not many range units being run. We did see 2 Martell players, I think, hopefully both running Sunspear. Sandskerm, sorry. Yeah, Sandskerm, and Sandskerm. Yeah, cool. Kind of becoming a staple in the Martell lists. Baratheon's running at least 1 unit of Thornwatch. That's good too. I mean, I don't see many. I mean, we see a Free Folk run there on a mag list. Okay, and a steer with. I know that list. Okay, cool. You look at someone's list and you're like, huh, that's familiar.
Yeah, I had that at the LGT too, which was really funny.
I played you. I will say I played into you, and then I played into Brickfish immediately afterwards, and was like, same thing.
Deja vu.
Yeah, congratulations to Mark. I mean, it really depends. I really do think, and this is not like saying that Mark is good or bad. I really do think that this style of list has got quite a lot of maneuverability in the Drogon Rhaegal, and that can also just make GCS, like the GCS, get into combat, and then you can just be like, assault orders melee, assault orders melee, assault orders melee. I do think that this style of list will beat those melee tramp lists, which just want to march forward, because it has all the maneuverability to get into a better position than the melee lists.
Yeah.
It can hold up with a defensive unit in the GCS, or defensive if it needs to be defensive. Then it just munches you with dragons.
Yeah. Yep. And that's exactly the thing. If you're... Obviously, this is just my personal opinion, but if you are a Greyjoy player, and I think you should be running Varys and Wendy every single time. Because yes, Wendy got worse, but Wendy was not good because of the fact that he could throw out 1 million shifts. It's because he could give out the shifts when you really goddamn needed a shift. And that has not changed, because round 1 you are still going to get a shift every single time anyway. Or rather, get a token anyway. so it doesn't matter that you don't start with one. Obviously, it's big enough. It's sad. But again, I still think Guinevere was the best 4-put NCU in the game pre-patch.
Yep.
By quite a big margin. You had him, you had Ilaria second place, and then Baelish third.
Yep.
Pycelle probably fourth.
I would tend to agree. And with that, guys, congratulations to Markabel, and we will look at what's coming up. We have got an event in Germany, in Deutschland. I'm not going to pronounce this. Bedburg, Germany this weekend. Hopefully the 9th. I'm going to pronounce this. Schonen and Kalarian. There we go.
You know, we're all here for your interpretations.
I know, right? Another event this weekend happening at Goblin Trader in Barcelona. An event happening in Russia. No, I can't read Russian. Cyrillic. An event happening in Warsaw, Poland. This, I believe, is like a tester for the big Polish event coming up, of course, at the few weeks' time with the Polish Nationals. An event happening at Games Day Bastion in Quebec, Canada. Unbound, Unbent, and Broken happening in Hurricane, WV, West Virginia. Yeah.
In a hurricane. And I thought it was adventurous to play a tournament in a forest in the UK. But no, they're actually playing in a hurricane. What is it with Americans always needing to one-up us?
But it is actually literally called, the place is called Hurricane. In Charleston, which is West Virginia. Yeah. An event in Fresno, in Clovis, California, Ender's Game. An event happening in Shanghai, the Shanghai Fight Club, for their October variant of it. Another event in Russia. An event in Barbuk for Alex's departure, France. So an event, I'm guessing, for an event for someone who's just about to leave. It's sad that they're leaving. We're having an event, which is hey song. So
Hey.
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 events happening this weekend, and of course next weekend we have the large Polish National Championship, which I'm looking forward to seeing the results for as they come in, talking to the players when it all kind of dies down, when it's over, but seeing how the event kind of plays out as well. This is by far the largest event we've ever seen for Song. I'm really stoked. I'm really kind of excited by it. Carlo, do you think he's going to win it?
Definitely could. If Carlo takes Night's Watch again, shouldn't be too difficult. Obviously Carlo, there's just no doubt he is one of the best players in the world. I think he has a very decent chance. I think he has a very, very, very decent chance. I'm not sure what other big names there are. I haven't been able to go, which is really unfortunate. I really would have loved to. So I haven't really looked into too much who's going. I didn't even know Carlo was going until you just told me now.
I only found out like the week before LGT or something. Don't worry.
Fair. But yeah, Carlo's in with a very, very good chance. Solid player. Really solid player. The Polish community are, from what I've seen, at least, again, just from what I've seen, the Polish community does seem to be the most skilled Song community if you look at an average level. Now, given the fact that there's literally 110 Polish players there at the tournament, and I've played against maybe 20 of them.
140 Polish, it's ridiculous.
That is insane. But yeah, and I've played like 20 of them, so that's just going off from what I've seen. But you can also look at the top level of stats, and they make a pretty decent chunk of that. Pretty decent chunk of the top 100. And yeah, so it's definitely going to be interesting. Carlo's a good shout. WAP definitely has a chance as well. Marky Mark, if you run Stark, I am gonna laugh. Night's Watch definitely has a chance. Jacob, if he just stops his dogs from dying to Lannister supremacy, it'll probably be fine.
I don't believe his man.
I'm not sure. It's interesting.
I don't believe it has the balls to be able to beat the John 8.
Yeah.
Not played by a good player. I guess we'll see.
Any-
Obviously, there's multiple
yeah.
polls who might win it.
Yeah. Any other big names that I haven't read out?
Sławek, obviously Polish names go through Sławek, Bloodraven is always in with a shout. I mean, he's been an kind of like existing player. Podwis is playing. Podwis is a decent player. He's playing. I believe Suster with his Baratheons. I don't think Baratheons have got much hope of winning the event, but Suster's a very good player. I'm trying to think who else might be there. Gonna be good.
Yeah, I mean, Podwis would definitely be a good shout. I think my money would probably be Podwis or...
Black's alright.
Yeah, Podwis or Carlo, I think. That would be my money.
Yeah, probably. Orgmo. No, not Orgmo. Not Pascal.
Pascal's good, but he has an obsession with Renly side Baratheon that I unfortunately think would get slightly in the way.
Sophie's not playing Black Joker. She'll be at the event, but she won't actually be playing, I believe. But yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. I'll obviously be seeing the results come in and watching the games, following the game, seeing how it all pans out, and then we'll discuss it, I guess, when it's all finished. That's in 2 weeks' time. So there might be an episode next week. Probably not, because I'm going to be in the middle of a house move. Yes, I am moving house. So I will no longer be here with this lovely cupboard with the dog food behind it outside, and with the same internet connection. And there might be some better lighting, or worse lighting, or worse internet connection. We will see. But certainly on next week, I will be not. There will be no episode next week, guaranteed. So yeah, apart from that, guys, I wish you all the best for the next kind of couple of weeks. Have a good one. Anything you want to say, Cajo?
I don't think so. Just, yeah, thanks for having me on, and also just going a little step further as well. There's no way I would have won the Invitational without everything I've learned from yourself in these past 10 months. So, and I think I speak for everyone who's watching right now when I say this. It's a lot of work to, all the work you do for stats, but also the 17-hour-long conversations you have on Discord up until 4 a.m. in the morning, and also just this weekly show. It's a lot of work, and it benefits a lot of people, and there's no way that I would have learned as much as I have in that time without that. So just a big thank you, and I look forward to another big and exciting year of Song of Ice and Fire.
Well, thank you very much. Didn't pay him to say that, by the way. Yeah, no, appreciate it.
Wait, what?
What? Yeah, so yeah, thanks for being on, and again, congratulations on your win. It's been great to see you come from basically not playing the game at all 10 months ago to playing the game a lot now, and I'm also really glad that you mentioned Imperial Assault about 1/10 the amount that you used to. Maybe 100th of the amount that you used to.
I did notice that you didn't ask me my background to this episode, and I think I know why.
It would have been someone mentioning Imperial Assault and Spectre Cell for the last 15 years of their life. Let's not. Right. And with that note, guys, this is not Imperial Assault. This is Song, the greatest war game in the history of war games ever. Much better than any other war game possibly ever have been. Or will be. That's not true. Have a good week. Enjoy yourselves, enjoy your events, enjoy your games, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Take it easy, guys.
Screw Spectre.
Ready? Aim! There's too many! Anyone see my mammoth? Stubby!